Chapter 1, A Drunken Night, Confused and Infatuated. They stayed up late into the night. Under the orange lamp, the broad back of the man rose and fell violently, as if it were about to tear apart the delicate woman beneath it. "You worked hard last night, and here's a tip of 300 yuan. Wenjiao slipped 300 yuan into the man's hand by the bed, blushing as she tugged at the collar of her shirt, but she couldn't hide the many ambiguous pink marks on her fair neck. The indelible marks quietly hinted at last night's craziness. Damn it, because she was in a bad mood, her best friend asked her to go to the recently popular hunk restaurant. She didn't expect to drink too much, and although she couldn't remember how she got to the hotel after getting drunk, she vaguely remembered the rest of the process. The man in front of her was worthy of the name hunk, with a perfect appearance and full marks for his skills. She just didn't know that the hunks at the restaurant, in addition to dancing for fun, also provided this kind of service. When she got up, the bright red bloodstains on the soft white sheets could no longer be hidden. It was done, and there was no use regretting it. After all, it was the other person's job. After paying the tip, they were even. However, the man, clutching the 300 yuan, his handsome face suddenly darkened. He was the president of the Wu group, and yet he was treated like a gigolo by a strange woman? The 300 yuan in his hand was a great humiliation to him. Now 29 years old, Hu Beima is approaching the age for marriage, and is constantly being pressured by his 80-year-old grandmother to get married. Last night, his grandmother forced him to go on a blind date again, and the woman even drugged him in order to get ahead. Fortunately, he has always had amazing perseverance, and not only did he not let the blind date get its way, he also beat the shameless woman into a national treasure. He just didn't expect that after finally getting rid of the former, the drunk woman in front of him actually entered the wrong room. In the past, no one could force him to do anything he didn't want to do, but last night he didn't dislike her at all. She exuded a heady fragrance of wine, and every move she made was like tickling a kitten, making him want to keep going even when he couldn't anymore. A series of unfortunate circumstances had led to the situation he was in. When Jiu Huang shook his head to clear his thoughts, and hurriedly left. As soon as he opened the door, he saw an old lady standing there with a kind smile on her face. She squeezed Wenjiao's hand and looked at her with delight, her old eyes hiding her fondness for her. Wenjiao didn't know this old lady at all. In a daze, a rather helpless voice came from behind her. "Grandma, why are you here?" Hu Beimo put on a white bathrobe, with the belt hanging down wantonly, unrestrained. Tall and charming, he walked quickly, his firm muscles faintly visible, adding a few more strong masculine charms. Wenjiao thought for a long time, and realized that this must be the headliner from the nightclub last night. She would never meet such a charming and carefree man in her life. The shallow teeth marks on his Adam's apple, like those of a cat, made Wenjiao blush. Was she that horny last night? "Xiao Uncle Zhuang introduced Miss Chen to call this morning to complain that you have a problem." Grandma was so worried that she couldn't even eat breakfast. "Seeing you like this, Grandma is relieved." The woman who had a blind date with Hu Beima said on the phone that Hu Beima must have a problem in that area, otherwise how could he not be able to perform even after being drugged? At this moment, looking at Wenjiao's white neck with the unmistakable red marks of intimacy, a mysterious smile appeared at the corner of Hu's lips. "You've got it all wrong, Wenjiao hurriedly explained. Before she could finish, Hu Beima suddenly stretched out his arm and wrapped it tightly around her waist. He was so strong, and it made her mind drift back to last night's madness. Wenjiao's ears turned red. "Is Grandma relieved now?" Hu Beima asked with a raised eyebrow. It was as if they were a couple. Wenjiao stared at him in shock, her eyes widening. "Don't worry, Grandma is relieved now. You two get along well, so Grandma won't bother you two while you're courting." Wenjiao wanted to say that they didn't know each other, but the words stuck in her throat. Looking at the happy expression on the old woman's face, she really couldn't bring herself to tell her the truth. It was true, if they weren't short of money, who would want to do such a job without dignity? She didn't want to expose him in front of the other person's grandmother. So, instead of denying it, she gave Hu Beimei a sympathetic look and gave her a smile that was even uglier than crying. Hu Beimei finally let go after Hu Beimei's grandmother had left contentedly. "Last night. The service was good last night, I'll give it 5 stars. Wenjiao hid like a thief, not even daring to look the other person in the eye. If this job is so shameful, she felt that she as a customer was not much better, and just hoped that they would never cross paths again. She covered her face with her hands and left quickly. Hu Beima squinted his dark eyes as he looked at the bloodstains on her jeans. Are women so unrestrained nowadays? They don't care about their first night? Last night she at least saved him, and he had wanted to discuss how to make amends. 1 month later. When Jiao woke up early in the morning, feeling only a churning in her stomach. This had been the case for 3 consecutive days. After calculating the time, she, who had always had regular periods, realized that her period had been 3 weeks late. Thinking about the crazy night a month ago, when Jiao's heart sank. It's over, she's not pregnant, is she? No way. It was only the one time, there's no way I could get pregnant. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Jiang Qiulin, Wen Jiao's mother, called out, Wen Jiao, what time is it? Are you ready? Don't keep Mr. Chen waiting. Wen Jiao had promised her family that she would go on a blind date with a widower. The man was a businessman with good financial means. After Wen Jiao's brother became a vegetable in a car accident, the high daily cost of his care had left the family at a loss. The whole family had expressed their intention to give up, but Wen Jiao disagreed. After all, in this family, only her brother treated her well. When Wen Jiao was born, her father's investment failed, and the family sold their house and car to make ends meet and pay off the debt. It was only when her younger sister was born that the family restaurant appeared on TV, and business gradually picked up. Although they couldn't make a fortune, the family's financial situation improved a lot. For this reason, the whole family believed that it was their younger sister who brought blessings to the family. From childhood to adulthood, the whole family favored the younger sister, thinking that she was the little lucky star, while Wen Jiao felt like an adopted child. Even when she was sick, no one cared for her except her brother, of course. I remember once, when my mother bought my younger sister a princess dress, Wen Jiao looked at it with envy and loss hidden in her eyes. Later, my brother used the pocket money he had saved for a long time to buy her a princess dress. When she was in high school, her brother often sent her living expenses after he had saved up, for fear that she would not have enough money to eat. Everything was still vivid in her memory. How could she, who had been so good to her brother, watch him die? She thought that if the situation were reversed, her brother would never give up on her life either. After struggling for a while, she agreed to go on a blind date and marry someone. As long as there was still a glimmer of hope, she had to save her brother. Fortunately, when they arrived at the restaurant, Boss Chen had not yet arrived. Wen waited for half an hour before the other party arrived. The old man sitting in front of her was already in his 50s, with a fat head and big ears, and a shrewd look in his eyes. At the first glance at Wen, his eyes were fixed, making her feel very uncomfortable. A young and pretty girl like you coming out on a blind date with me is nothing but for money, he said contemptuously. Wen's face flushed, but she had no way to argue. After all, she did it for the money. Seeing Wen Jiao's silence, Boss Chen simply came right out and said, Little girl, my wife has been dead for many years, and my children have both graduated from university. Now, I want to find someone to take care of my life. If you follow my lead, you won't have to worry about food or clothing. However, I have to make one thing clear, my assets are reserved for my children, and they have nothing to do with you. Wen Jiao's face felt as if it was on fire. She imagined that marriage should be based on love, but the reality is that marriage is only about interests. My mother said that if you are satisfied with each other, you are willing to pay 2 million yuan in bride price, right? She asked with all her courage. Mr. Chen lit a cigarette. In the smoke, Wen Jiao felt a wave of nausea. Yes. But the money will only be given after the examination, I can't marry a second-hand product, he said frivolously, and then spat out a puff of smoke. The smoke that hit her face made Wen Jiao unable to hold back anymore. She nearly vomited, and quickly got up, saying, Sorry, I'm going to the bathroom. She covered her mouth and got up, running like a headless fly towards the bathroom, when she hit a soft wall. The sour taste that had already reached her throat burned up. Ugh. Chapter 2 Young people, should you have children or not? She couldn't hold back after all, and vomited. The private suit in her line of sight was stained with acid water. Wen Jiao covered his sour lips, slowly looked up, and met a pair of dark but familiar eyes. To his surprise, the gloomy-looking man in front of him was actually the hunk from the other night. Xiao Mo, isn't this your girlfriend? Grandma Hua shouted in surprise from the side. That day at the hotel, Grandma Hua was worried about affecting the young couple's date, and she didn't even have time to ask Wen Jiao's name. After that, Grandma Hua repeatedly asked Hua Beimo to bring his girlfriend home for dinner, but he always found an excuse to get out of it. Unexpectedly, she ran into her at the restaurant. At this moment, Wen Jiao felt so embarrassed. Not only did he spit on someone, but he also didn't want to see this man a second time in his life. Mainly because as soon as he saw him, indescribable images would come to mind, which was very embarrassing. "I'm sorry." Wenjio quickly apologized. She rummaged in her bag and took out some tissue paper, ready to wipe it for him. Huobeima's veins on the sides of his temples slightly bulged, and he endured the discomfort as he took off his sour-smelling suit jacket. Wenjio didn't have time to stop him, and the suit jacket had already gone into the trash can next to him. He has always been a neat freak and really can't tolerate wearing dirty clothes. Instead, under his grandmother's watchful gaze, he looked back at Wenjio and asked in a calm voice, "Are you feeling unwell? Why did you throw up?" The tone of his voice was so similar to that of a gentle boyfriend who was concerned about his girlfriend. Wenjio was taken aback, and only then did he remember that his grandmother didn't know what kind of work her grandson did, and she even thought that the two of them were a couple. Wenjio mused, "This hunk has gone astray, but he takes his grandmother's feelings into account everywhere, so he is quite filial." Before she could reply, a female voice came from the table next to theirs. "Handsome, your girlfriend must be pregnant. I was just like her when I was pregnant. She's suffering from morning sickness." The speaker was a female diner at the next table, who was gently stroking her big belly and had an expectant expression on her face. Wenjio was petrified on the spot. "Morning sickness? Xiao Mo, is this true? Is Grandma going to hold a great-grandchild?" Grandma Hua could hardly contain her excitement. Every day she worried that her grandson's withdrawn nature would put him at a disadvantage with his wife. She never imagined that Huobeima would make a splash and get straight to the point. "Don't be afraid, young lady, I'm Xiaomo's grandmother. Don't worry, our Xiaomo will take care of everything." As she spoke, Grandma Hua squeezed Wenjio's hand tightly. At that moment, Boss Chen walked in with a scowl on his face and began to yell at her, "You're pregnant and you're still coming here to cheat people out of money? A tramp who's carrying someone else's child has the nerve to ask me for 2 million in bride price." Suddenly, everyone in the restaurant turned to look at Wenjio. Is this woman made of gold? How dare she ask for 2 million in bride price? She thinks she's pretty and she seduces men everywhere, and she's pregnant and still coming here to find a husband. Wenjio felt her cheeks burning. After all, she did ask for 2 million. As for the pregnancy, after everyone had said something, she became even more unsure. Could it be that she really was suffering from morning sickness? "I'm sorry." Wenjio quickly pulled her hand away from Grandma Hua's. In her embarrassment, Huobeimei grabbed her hand. Wenjio looked up and met Huobeime's deep, dark eyes. He said in a deep voice, "You had a fight and went on a blind date behind my back?" Wenjio's pupils widened in surprise. He was trying to save her? She had to admit, the man in front of her was a very good actor. She knew that as soon as this Mr. Chen arrived, he would demand that the woman be physically pure, and since she had already lost her virginity, the blind date was doomed. Rather than being mistaken for a woman who cheats in marriage, she might as well take the step down that Huobeima had given her. "Mr. Chen, I'm really sorry, but I did have a fight with my boyfriend. My family still doesn't know that I have a boyfriend, so..." "Hoof. Your parents also said that you've never had a boyfriend before, so you're guaranteed to be clean. This little girl's already gotten pregnant, and she's still out here trying to scam money." Boss Chen's face was full of contempt. Wenjio was extremely embarrassed. Huobeimo narrowed his dark eyes and coldly replied, "You are old enough to be the father of a young girl, but you are still meeting people for marriage. You are disrespectful of your old age, and you dare to talk to me about being clean? You get out." Huobeimo spoke in a soft tone but with great emphasis on the single word. His face was gloomy, and he exuded a very oppressive aura, making the already short Boss Chen feel even shorter mentally. Although Boss Chen was angry, he was afraid of Huobeima and had no choice but to leave in disgrace. "Xiao Mo, you really are something. What's the point of having a fight when you could be scaring your girlfriend and harming the baby?" Grandma Hua was extremely nervous. "Grandma, I don't think I'm pregnant." Wenjio still felt sick to her stomach, which made her feel very guilty. "This is morning sickness, so I must be pregnant. Grandma has been there before and she won't be wrong. Let's go to the hospital." "No, I have something else to do later." Wenjio panicked. Even if she was pregnant, she couldn't let a stranger have her baby. Grandma thought they were a couple, but she knew exactly what her relationship with Huobeima was. Huobeima turned to his grandmother and said, "Grandma, I'll take her to the hospital for a checkup, and we'll talk later." He took Wenjio and left. As for Grandma Hua, her bodyguard, who was not far behind, naturally took care of her. Today, Grandma Hua asked Huabema to take her to the newly opened restaurant to eat, just to ask about his girlfriend. Unexpectedly, not only did she bump into her future granddaughter-in-law, but she also discovered that the other party was suspected of being pregnant. Once they arrived outside the restaurant, Wenjiu quickly withdrew her hand. "I'm sorry about that. And thank you for helping me out. If that's all, I'll be going now." Wenjiu saw Huabema and felt like she was seeing a ghost. She wanted to escape, and escape only. "Wait." Huabema called out to her. "Is there something else?" Wenjiu's eyes flickered. She felt her cheeks burning. From beginning to end, she had been afraid to look Huabema in the eye. As soon as she got close to him, she felt surrounded by a very masculine aura, as if she were about to be torn apart and swallowed, and she felt inexplicably embarrassed. "Are you really pregnant?" he asked. "Don't worry about it. If it's true, I won't hold you responsible. It's not easy working in your line of work, I understand." Wenjiu spoke quickly. "We're both adults, we have to take responsibility for our own mistakes." Huabema was speechless. "What kind of work? Does he really look like that?" "Go to the hospital." He didn't bother to explain. "What?" "Go to the hospital for a checkup." Wenjiu frowned slightly, assuming that the other person was also afraid of trouble. In order to reassure each other, it was indeed necessary to go for a checkup. There happened to be a hospital near the restaurant, so the two simply went to the hospital together. Soon, the results of the checkup came out. In the consultation room, the doctor held the report in front of the two of them. Approximately 5 weeks of intrauterine pregnancy plus. The moment they saw the ultrasound results, they were both stunned. Although Huabema did not know Wenjiu's private life, he knew that he had asked someone for the first time, and judging from the time of the ultrasound results, it was indeed during the time he had sex with him. "Young people, do you want a child or not?" the doctor asked. Chapter 3, Marry Me and Have the Baby. It seems that the doctor is used to the irresponsible behavior of many young people. Wenjiu was still at a loss for what to do, but unexpectedly, Huabema, who was standing nearby, said firmly in a deep voice, "Yes." The doctor adjusted his glasses and seemed to be a little surprised. Not bad, there are not many responsible boys nowadays, and the young lady has good taste." The doctor praised her while saying, "Pay attention to nutrition during pregnancy. I'll prescribe you some folic acid and maternal milk powder. Go home and take good care of your baby." "No, that's not necessary." Wenjiu suddenly got up. She fled from the consultation room with a pale face. She couldn't believe it. She was really pregnant. From the moment her brother became a vegetable, she had lost the right to pursue happiness. What's more, she was pregnant with a stranger's child. How could she absurdly want this child? Her mind was in a whirl, and she just wanted to be alone. As a result, after a few steps, her wrist was suddenly grasped firmly. "Marry me and give birth to the child," he said forcefully in her ear. It sounded more like an order, as if he had been in a high position for a long time and often took others' actions for granted. "Are you joking? A man in his profession is actually willing to take responsibility for his customers?" Huabeimo's dark eyes stared straight at Wenjiu's flushed little face. "If you're willing to marry that old man for his 2 million yuan bride price, I can give you 5 times that." 5 times, 10 million yuan? Wenjiu was full of disbelief. She stared wide-eyed, looking at Huabeima for the first time. The man's features were like those of a famous sculptor. His skin was fair and smooth, except for those deep, dark eyes, cold and bloodthirsty, which even from this close gave off a feeling of being unapproachable. "Is that kind of work really that profitable?" Wenjiu asked weakly. She wondered, even if he was the head waiter at the restaurant, how many customers would he have to serve to save 10 million? Huabeima was annoyed and amused, and casually replied, "Yes. That must be hard work, right?" Wenjiu couldn't help but feel sympathy. Huabeimo's face was a mass of dark lines. "However, you have excellent physical fitness, and your service is really great." Wenjiu couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. She was genuinely praising him. From the perspective of a wealthy woman, she thought, she would be more than willing to buy Huabeima's services. As a result, after the words fell, she realized that Huabeima was looking at her with some meaning in his eyes. What kind of harsh words did she just say?" Huabeima pursed his lips and coughed twice before he regained control of his expression. Did he just get a compliment? No man could resist being told they were good in bed, right? Will you marry me? If that's not enough, I'll give you 10 million. That's a lot. But can I go back and think about it? Wenjiao always felt that everything was unreal. Compared to marrying a man in his 50s, the man in front of her was indeed a better choice. For one thing, he was the father of her child, and for another, Wenjiao needed money, and he could give her more. However, she was a little concerned about the father of her child being in his profession. She had sacrificed her whole life, and now she had to sacrifice her child's life as well? The child was innocent. Add a contact, and I'll give you a day to think about it. Only then did Huo Beimei let go of her hand. As usual, he was aloof. In Wenjiao's eyes, he didn't seem to be inferior to his profession at all, but on the contrary, he was very arrogant. Wenjiao took out his phone and added Huo Beimei to WeChat. His name is simply Mo, and his profile picture is a black and white picture, just like his powerful and dark aura, making people feel uneasy around him. Wenjiao is a teacher in an art studio, and he has added many parents of his students to WeChat. In order to avoid not being able to find people, he added the word tough guy to Huo Beimei's note. When he got home, it was already dark. As soon as he entered the house, his parents surrounded him. The noodle shop now has several employees, and the two elderly only help out in the shop during peak hours and have already returned for a break. Wenjiao, Boston said you have a boyfriend and are pregnant, is that true? Zhang Qiulin asked as soon as she arrived. Wenjiao had been distracted all day and just wanted some peace and quiet when she returned, but unfortunately they didn't give her any time to catch her breath. Yes, I'm pregnant. She replied truthfully. What? You crazy girl. Do you know how hard it was to raise you? You're pregnant with a bastard child before you're even married, and you've disgraced the Wen family. Great, with your broken body, you won't even get the 200,000 yuan in bride price, let alone the 2 million. Zhang Qiulin was furious. It was as if the money that was within her grasp had flown away. As soon as she mentioned raising her, Wenjiao Hong's eyes welled up with tears, and she stared straight at Zhang Qiulin. Since I was little, have you ever given me a kind face, apart from feeding me? When I was little, Ying got 100 points on an exam, and you gave her all kinds of rewards. But when I got 100 points, no one even looked at me. You even stopped me from taking the college entrance exam because you said you didn't have the money, but Ying had the money to go to art school? After graduating from high school, I worked part-time while studying art. Apart from the living expenses my brother sent me, have you ever given me a single penny? How can you compare yourself to Ying? She is the one who brought blessings to our family. What are you? As for your brother's money, isn't it our money? Now that your brother has become a vegetable, who do you think you are to be in love freely? The boys you meet at your age are all poor boys, and once you marry them, you will never get out of it. No, you go and get rid of the bastard now and break up with that poor boy. Zhang Qiulin clenched her wrist unwillingly, ready to drag her to the hospital. When Jianan also said from the side, while the fetus is still small, let your mother take you to the hospital to get it done, so you don't get teased when your belly gets big. Wenjiao always knew that her parents didn't like her very much, but she didn't know that they didn't even consider her a human being. If, today, she was really pregnant with the child of her lover, but her family forced her to go to the hospital, how sad that would be. She coldly shouted, "Let go of me, or I'll call the police." Zhang Qiulin froze, and for the first time, she realized that Wenjiao was no longer the little girl she could manipulate at will. Taking advantage of Zhang Qiulin's moment of weakness, Wenjiao quickly walked towards her room. Wen Jianan, look at this little bitch. I told you she was a disaster the moment she was born, and look at what she's become. It's fine that she got pregnant before getting married, but I was kind enough to take her to solve the problem, and she dared to threaten me with the police. Zhang Qiulin was full of disbelief. With a bang, Wenjiao slammed the door. She took out her headphones from the drawer, put them on, and turned up the music to the loudest volume, so that the world would finally be quiet. After thinking it over, she really had no choice. No matter who the father of her child was, she needed the 10 million. Finally, she mustered up the courage to send a message to Hunk. Can you really give me 10 million? However, as the minutes ticked by, there was no reply from the other person. She thought, is this his working hours? Or, is he just playing a joke on her? How can an ordinary person casually come up with 10 million? Wenjiao began to feel very ridiculous. How dare she actually ask someone for 10 million in bride price? Is she crazy for money? It was around midnight when Wenjiu had completely given up hope, when her phone by the pillow vibrated with a notification. Huobeima's concise reply was 2 words: account. Chapter 4, Getting Married. Wenjiu couldn't believe that the other person really wanted her account. 10 million is no small sum, not just anyone can come up with it. With a try-it-out mentality, she sent her bank account number. 5 minutes later, a text message came from her phone. Your savings card with the last digit 8888 has received 10 million renminbi. P.S. See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Wenjiu was stunned. She counted the money again and again to make sure it was really 10 million yuan. The man had actually cheerfully transferred her 10 million yuan. It seems that there really is a top in every profession. On the spot, her emotions were extremely mixed. She was happy that her brother's medical expenses would finally be taken care of, but she was also complex because she was about to become a wife and a mother. Early the next morning, she took her household registration booklet with her and planned to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to keep her appointment. When Jianan and Jiang Qiulin were chatting over breakfast, when Josie smelled the leek pancakes and covered his nose as he walked towards the door. When Josie, where are you rushing off to? Jiang Qiulin called out after her. When Jiu paused, but before she could reply, Jiang Qiulin continued, last night I called and begged Boss Chen, and he generously said that as long as you get rid of the bastard in your belly and cut off all contact with that poor kid, he is still willing to give the wedding gift, but only 1 million. However, 1 million is not bad, enough to cover our family expenses. When Joji stared at Jiang Qiulin and angrily said, I agreed to marry someone in order to pay for my brother's medical expenses, not for your expenses. She was utterly disappointed. You never liked me since we were young, and I accepted that. I thought you would at least be different towards my brother, but it turns out that you are just like everyone else. You have saved up a little over the years, but after my brother was diagnosed as a vegetable, you wouldn't even spare a penny. How could you bear to just watch your own son die? When Jiu realized that not all parents love their children. When Nanji was healthy, they might have favored the boy a little, just like many families that value boys over girls, but once their interests are at stake, they are just as indifferent to the boy. They only love themselves. Your brother is beyond saving. You've seen a few vegetative people wake up, so what's the difference between giving him the money for treatment and throwing it in the water? When Jian sighed. Even if I were to throw the money into the water, I would still try, because I feel that family is more important than money. She will never forget the warmth her brother has brought her over the years. If it weren't for Nanji's protection, she, who has always lived in a dark world, dares not imagine what she would be like now, and how could she live an active life and become an art teacher? When Jiu clenched her teeth as she finished speaking, and left without looking back. When Jiu, if you dare to step out of this door today, don't ever come back, and let's pretend you were never born. Jiang Qiulin yelled at her back. Qiulin, forget it, go back and persuade her properly. What's there to persuade? She refuses to get rid of the bastard child of a poor man, and her life is over. Next time she thinks of us, it'll be because she's so poor she can't make ends meet. If I don't put my foot down now, are you going to support her child in the future? When Jianan didn't say another word. When Jiu was utterly disappointed. She knew that since when Nanji had become a vegetable, his parents, who couldn't bear to spend another penny, would never visit him in the hospital again. In that case, she wouldn't tell them about the 10 million yuan she had received. From now on, she would be responsible for Nanji's medical expenses herself. This cold family, she would not go back to it if she didn't have to. In the cold wind, when Jiu stood in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau until 9 o'clock sharp, when Huobeima appeared on time. He got out of the back seat of the Rolls-Royce and, dressed in a suit, exuded a cold and dignified air. When Jojo thought to herself, this man is punctual. If she didn't know his occupation, she would have thought he was a big boss from the way he was dressed. The more pretentious Huobeima appeared, the more sympathy when Jojo felt for him. It was as if she could imagine the scene of him trying hard to please the old rich woman with a fierce expression on her face. Until, when the two of them were registering, at the moment when Huobeima wrote his name, the staff at the marriage registry suddenly looked at the two of them with strange stares. In particular, the gaze that fixed on Huobeima was obviously one of admiration, while the gaze that looked at Wenjiu was one of undisguised envy. Wenjiu glanced strangely at the registration form and was almost struck by lightning when he saw the 3 characters Huobeima. Who in the entire capital city had not heard of Huobeima? The Hua group is the leader of the 4 major groups in the country, and Huobeima is the new leader of the Hua group. However, he is a low-key person who does not like his private life to be interfered with. Even if he is in the news, no media dares to publish clear photos of him. Moreover, he is not an entertainment star, so not everyone will pay attention to his news. Therefore, ordinary people naturally do not recognize him. When Jiu pondered, there are not many people in the capital with the surname Hua, and there should be no one else with the name Hua Beima. Could it be that he is not in the profession she thought he was? It makes sense. Who is an ordinary person who casually gives her 10 million? If he really is that rich, who would still do that kind of work? She really has been in a daze lately. When Hua Beima said he was willing to give her 10 million, she should have realized that he was not an ordinary person. Recalling everything that happened that day, it seems that he never said from beginning to end that he did that kind of work. Sign. Hua Beima gestured. When Jiu, who had been in a daze, suddenly came to her senses. She looked at Hua Beima and wanted to say something but couldn't. You are. Thinking about the precious 10 million in her account, when Jiu swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She signed her name and went through the entire marriage registration process with Hua Beima, and finally got her little red book. After the two of them walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau together, she still felt like it wasn't real. She was just married? And her husband was the famous Hua Beima? Sorry, I've been mistaken for a long time. When Jiu blushed and explained. Before she could finish, Hua Beima suddenly paused, tilted his head and looked at her. His seductive, peach blossom eyes twinkled with an unknown meaning. When Jiu realized that it was better not to explain some things. My grandmother thinks we are a real couple, so you need to help me deal with the old people later, and this is the agreement I have prepared, please take a look. If you have no problem with it, just sign it. He handed Wen Jiu an agreement. Wen Jiu read it carefully word for word. The content of the agreement was nothing more than that the two were only in a contractual marriage, that Wen Jiu needed to live with Hua Beima and help act like a loving couple in front of Hua's grandmother, and that the rest of the time, they would not interfere with each other. The contract period would end on the day the baby was born, and at that time, they would keep the child and would be given another 100 million yuan as compensation. Which was equivalent to wanting the child but not the wife. Wen Jiu was a person with self-knowledge, and she was already content to get 10 million yuan, so how could she really consider herself Hua's wife? She has never eaten pork, but she has seen pigs running around. She understands that the wives of the rich and powerful are nothing more than shields. As for leaving the child behind, she thought that with her financial situation, it would naturally be better to leave the child with the Hua family. However, the compensation of 100 million yuan written in the contract really surprised her. She could only say that poverty had limited her imagination. She had thought that 10 million yuan was already a lot. Although she didn't want the money, she didn't think she was losing out in any way. So she signed the agreement without hesitation. Chapter 5: Pregnant Women Shouldn't Take the Subway. I'm currently living in Villa 8 in Baidu Mingcheng. Here's the key. Hua Beima took back the agreement with satisfaction and handed her the key. Baidu Mingcheng? That's a top-notch neighborhood in the center of Jingcheng. The studio where she works is in an apartment in Baidu Mingcheng, and the hospital where her brother works is nearby. Previously, Wen Jiu had been renting an old and run-down apartment opposite Metropolis North. After Wen Nanji's accident, she had moved back home to save money. Normally, she had to transfer 2 subway stops to get to the studio. Before this, she had never thought that she would be able to move into Metropolis North one day. Can I move in today? Wen Jiu asked. Wen Jiu and her family had fallen out like this, and she had originally planned to go back and rent the old and rundown apartment. It seemed that she could save some money again. Although she has 10 million in her hands, as long as Wen Nanji is not awake, the bottomless pit will exist, so naturally she will save as much as she can. Yes. Hua Beima nodded. It was at this time that his phone rang. When Jiu was about to turn her head to go to the subway when Hua Beima suddenly reached out and put his arm around her shoulder. Seeing that Hua Beima had changed from the cold appearance he had had all morning, he said intimately in her ear, "Jiu, tell Grandma, have we got our certificate yet?" His warm breath slipped into her pale neck. Wen Jiu was stunned for a moment before she realized that it was a video call from Grandma Hua. Although the two of them had never formally introduced themselves, they had already learned basic information about each other when they registered their marriage. For example, their names and ages. Wen Jiu thought about the content of the agreement she had just signed and quickly waved to Grandma Hua in the video with a smile, saying, "Hello, Grandma. We just got our marriage certificate." Saying this, she opened her handbag and took out the little red book, waving it in front of the camera. Huobema leaned his head towards her, and the two of them were almost touching, just fitting into the frame. They looked very close and in love. A couple who happened to be passing by the Civil Affairs Bureau couldn't help but exclaim, "It's really different being newlyweds. The young couple is always spilling the beans of love." Wenjiu's face turned red, and she had never felt so shy. Although she was very uncomfortable, she had to continue to face with Huobema in order to fulfill the contract. Before this, she had never been in love, and apart from that night, this was the first time she had been so close to a man. "Xiao Mo, you finally agreed to tell Grandma the name of your wife. Listen, it is not easy for a woman to carry a child for 10 months, and you, as her husband, need to take good care of her in every way, understand?" Grandma Hua carefully explained. Huobema nodded and replied, "Don't worry, Grandma, I'll take good care of her. Don't worry too much, just take care of your health and wait to hold your great-grandchild." He really was very gentle and patient with Grandma Hua. In front of her, he completely dropped his cold mask towards outsiders. Grandma Hua was so happy that she couldn't stop smiling, and then she continued, "So about the wedding. Xiaojiu said she wants to wait until after the baby is born to have the wedding." After Huobema finished speaking, he looked at Wenjiu in his arms and signaled for her to cooperate. Wenjiu quickly picked up the conversation. "Yes, I hope that we are not having a wedding because of the baby, but because we are still willing to promise and be romantic with each other after the baby is born." "Very well, I support all of your young people's decisions." Seeing how relieved and happy Grandma Hua looked, Huobema looked at Wenjiu gratefully. After hanging up the phone, the two quickly drew apart, and their cheeks were a little red. "Then I'll go to the front to take the subway." Wenjiu awkwardly said hello and then turned her head towards the subway station. Before she could go far, a sudden wave of nausea came from her stomach. She felt dizzy and reached out to hold onto the nearby pole as she retched. Thinking about what his grandmother had just told him, and that his child was being conceived in that frail body, Huobema frowned, and a rare look of worry flashed in his eyes. Wenjiu coughed and retched for a while before remembering that she hadn't eaten anything since last night. First, she wasn't in the mood, and second, she threw up whatever she ate, so she simply had no appetite. As a result, all that came up was sour water, and there was nothing left in her stomach to throw up. Just as she was feeling miserable, Huobema's voice came over, "Get in the car." After all, he couldn't bear to leave a pregnant woman behind and told the driver to turn back. Wenjiu looked up, and her pale little face leapt into his dark eyes. This made Huobema even more aware that pregnant women are really vulnerable, and for the first time, a subtle desire to protect welled up in his heart. However, she had no intention of taking his car. Because of the signed contract, she always felt like she was doing something for money, and if it wasn't a situation where she had to cooperate in acting, she didn't want to trouble Huobema. So she waved her hand and said, "No, the bus stop is just up ahead. Pregnant women shouldn't take the subway. Get in the car." Huobema gave a direct order. When he finished speaking, Bai Hua, the special assistant and driver in front of him, nearly dropped his eyes. His CEO, who was not known for his womanizing, suddenly got married with a certificate and then got pregnant? His personal assistant had never seen him contact any woman, so how could he be pregnant? How could he be pregnant? In any case, he had seen what it meant to have a child. Wenjiu obediently got into the car. This was the first time she had ridden in such a luxurious car, and she felt uncomfortable, afraid of stepping on the carpet and dirtying it. Especially since Bai Hua, in front of her, was driving while looking at her through the rearview mirror, and smiling at her from time to time, making her even more nervous. Bai Hua was really curious about what kind of woman had taken his boss Hua away. "What are you staring at? Focus on driving." Huobema snapped. Bai Hua's small eyes were too scared to blink again. Wenjiu couldn't help smiling, so he looked out the window to hide his embarrassed expression. "Where are you going?" Huobema asked, glancing at his watch. "I'm going to go home to get some personal items, and then I'll go to the apartment complex where you live." Wenjiu replied truthfully. "Great. Where's your address?" Wenjiu gave Bai Hua the address, and Bai Hua turned the steering wheel and headed in the direction of Wen's house. They soon arrived at the gate of Wen's house. Wenjiu got out of the car alone and entered the courtyard. Bai Hua and Huobei waited in the car. After a while, they heard Jiang Qiulin's scolding voice from inside the gate. "Why did you come back? Aren't you rushing to give birth to a poor boy's child? Just consider me never having given birth to a little bitch like you, and get the hell out." Jiang Qiulin cursed while throwing Wenjiu's daily necessities out of the door. After making sure that there were no more of Wenjiu's things in the house, Jiang Qiulin mercilessly slammed the door shut with a loud bang. She shouted, "If you don't abort the baby, don't even think about entering this house again." Chapter 6. Is it you who got my daughter pregnant? Wenjiu's clothes, shoes, and beloved painting tools were scattered all over the floor like rubbish. It was as if the owner of the items had died. Although she had come back to get her things today, she was still hurt that her mother had directly thrown her out. She clenched her fists, trembled, and squatted down, picking up the items on the floor with tear-filled eyes. "Young lady, are you okay?" Bai Hua's voice came from over there. Hearing the scolding voices in the courtyard, Wu Beima asked him to come and take a look. He would never have guessed that Mr. Hua's new young wife would be thrown out of the house by her family. Wenjiu turned away, too embarrassed to face anyone, and quietly wiped away the tears. "I'll pick it up. I'll pick it up." Bai Hua hurriedly went over to help. Hearing the noise in the courtyard, Jiang Qiulin poked her head out to see that there was an extra man in the courtyard. She thought that Bai Hua was the boyfriend Wenjiu had been secretly seeing. With a dark face, she reopened the door, gave Bai Hua a quick glance, and the furrows between her brows, formed from years of hard work, became even deeper. "Wenjiu, is this the poor boy who got you pregnant?" Jiang Qiulin asked angrily. Bai Hua was carrying the painting equipment she had just organized and was about to carry it to the car. She wanted to explain when she heard Jiang Qiulin's voice. Unexpectedly, Jiang Qiulin then shouted into the room, "Jinan, come out and take a look at our daughter. She actually dared to bring a man home. She's really growing up fast." When Jinan quickly rushed out of the house, Jiang Qiulin pointed at Bai Hua and said disdainfully, "Look at the way this little white-eyed wolf looks at him. The man she found is ugly and poor, looks shifty and stupid. If he wasn't standing next to her, I'd think a thief had broken in." Bai Hua, who had innocently been targeted, turned pale. Ugly, poor, stupid, and shifty? Suddenly, he felt as if he heard his heart break. Wenjiu was extremely embarrassed, and she looked apologetically at Bai Hua and hurriedly apologized. "I'm sorry, my mother always speaks harshly, so please don't mind what she said." Bai Hua was dumbfounded. He never imagined that the beautiful young wife would have such a terrible mother. How could they bear to hurt her so much when so many people pray to the gods and Buddhas for beautiful daughters? Am I wrong? Giving birth to a child with such an ugly and poor man is a waste of youth. At your age, you haven't experienced the hardships of marriage and don't know how important money is. Get rid of the bastard as soon as possible, and you can still find a good family. Jiang Qiulin was furious. Since when Jianan's investment failed that year, she has been running the noodle shop to support the family. She has been worn down by reality and has become a profit-oriented person who doesn't care about emotions. In her eyes, money is the most important thing, and any sense of family or love is worthless. When Jianan also looked at Bai Hua with disgust, treating him like the villain who stood in the way of his wealth. He casually picked up the broom by the door and swung it hard in Bai Hua's direction, cursing, "You little brat, is it you who got my daughter pregnant? Die." Bai Hua was shocked. The Wen family members had misunderstood him for a young man, but if they kept saying that he had gotten the young wife pregnant, it would be embarrassing if it was heard by Wu Beima outside. So, while avoiding the broom, he explained, "Auntie and uncle, you've got it wrong, I'm just general manager Hua's driver. The young wife just got a certificate with our boss." "Didn't you know?" "What?" When Jianan's movements froze in midair. Bai Hua was about to explain further, but when Jiu, who had already collected all the clothes, signaled to him, "Since they have already driven me out, there is no need to explain too much to them about my affairs." When Jiu knew that Wu Beima and she were merely in a contractual relationship, and that his family affairs should not involve him at all. She carried her simple clothes and walked towards the courtyard gate. Bai Hua also followed her closely behind, carrying a storage box full of things. When Jianan and Jiang Qiulin glanced at each other, and the two of them followed after them with hindsight. They only saw that after Bai Hua put the luggage in the trunk, he returned to the driver's seat, and in the back seat of the car, there was still a man sitting next to Wenjiu. Wu Bei's cold and arrogant demeanor was so impressive that it could be seen from the car window. "Hurry up and drive, please," Wenjiu urged. Bai Hua also knew how scary the two old people in the Wen family were, so he quickly stepped on the accelerator. As a result, neither Wen Jianan nor Jiang Qiulin could see clearly, and the Rolls-Royce had already pulled away. They only knew that the young man who had just been scolded was indeed driving, and Wenjiu was sitting in the back of the car with the handsome man, looking more like a couple. At their age, although they didn't know Rolls-Royce, they also felt that this car seemed to be different from the usual small cars on the street. Could it be that the man in the car is the one Wenjiu is secretly dating? Jiang Qiulin muttered. It seems so. He's quite good-looking, no wonder Wenjiu is head over heels for him. What's the use of a good-looking man? Jiang Qiulin said with disdain. Back in the day, she married Wen Jianan early because he was good-looking, and ended up suffering economically for the rest of her life. But what did that guy just say? That Wenjiu and her boyfriend had gotten married? And he called himself just the boss's driver? Does that mean that Wenjiu's boyfriend is a big boss? And they secretly got married? Wen Jianan asked, a little disbelieving. It seems to be the case. Jiang Qiulin was also thinking. After a moment's thought, she snorted coldly. I guess she was tricked into marriage by a good-looking guy. The car and driver just now were probably hired to trick young girls. I just don't believe that Jinx could marry a rich man. Rich families are all very clever. Is it that easy for her to get a marriage certificate? Even if the one who just got here really is his driver, I don't think the man who got her pregnant is a big boss. In this day and age, there are a lot of companies, and there are shell companies everywhere. It's just a pity, because originally that boss Chen was willing to give a 2 million yuan bride price, but the little white face didn't give our family a penny, and the brat got her certificate with him. That's right, this daughter is considered to have been raised for nothing, and our Yingying is still considerate. When Jianan shook his head. Yes, Yingying has been blessed since birth. When the disaster struck and married off, Yingying was the only lucky star left in the family. It's better that we have fewer disasters, and our lives in the second half of our lives may be more smooth. Jiang Qiulin didn't care. In the car, Wenjiu didn't say a word the whole way. She pondered, Beimo must have heard a little of the commotion in the courtyard, but he didn't ask anything more, which relieved her. It is understandable. Given their relationship, there is indeed no need for him to care about her family situation. After the car arrived at the famous city of Beitu, Bai Hua was the first to get off and open the door. Wenjiu was still carrying her canvas bag with clothes, while Bai Hua went to the trunk and took out the storage box, holding it in his arms with difficulty. He had wanted to help Wenjiu carry the luggage directly into the house, but unexpectedly, Beimo then got off the car and took the storage box from him. He signaled to Wenjiu, come in. Chapter 7, Your Personal Preferences, So Unique. Bei likes peace and quiet. His personal space is his own and he never likes to be disturbed. Even Bai Hua, his special assistant, doesn't go into his home unless it's absolutely necessary. Usually, there's not even a live-in maid, just an aunt who comes regularly to clean the house. She does the cleaning and leaves when he's not home, never interfering with his life. He rarely eats at home, so naturally he doesn't need a personal chef. This is perhaps the advantage of being single, enough freedom. After Bai Hua understood, she let go. Wenjiu followed closely behind and entered the villa. She had worked in the studio in Baidu Mingqing for 6 months, and this was the first time she had been to the villa area in the community. After walking through the pleasing garden, she entered the magnificent villa hall. After Beimo led her up to the second floor and turned into one of the bedrooms, he placed the storage box on the table and said to her, I'll be living next door. Considering that there was no domestic helper and Wenjiu was pregnant, it was convenient to live next door. Wenjiu nodded and surveyed the black, white, and gray bedroom. The cool colors and even the furniture had an unaffordable quality that suited Beimo's personality. Unexpectedly, she took a few steps inside, tripped, and fell backwards, losing her balance and stepping on the mat. She instinctively let out a cry of alarm. The next second, Beimo caught her in his arms. The two were pressed together, and the familiar scent and warmth of him made her face flush. Are you okay? Beimo's gaze flickered with an imperceptible trace of nervousness. She was about to reply when, unexpectedly, something fell from the canvas bag slung over her shoulders. Fortunately, Beimo was quick-witted and, while holding Wenjiu in one arm, caught the dropped object with the other. He casually handed Wenjiu the object in his hand. She glanced at it and saw that it was a pink lace thong lying in the palm of his hand. On the spot, Wenjiu was struck like by lightning. She had been in such a hurry at home that she had thrown a bunch of clothes into the canvas bag haphazardly, and she hadn't noticed at all that it was a thong on the surface. This thong was a birthday gift from her mischievous best friend. She bought it in a big shopping mall, hoping that she would get married soon and be able to use it in front of her future boyfriend. But now, can she say that she has never worn it even once? Does Beimo believe her? I like it cool. Wenjiu said awkwardly, snatching the thong back and stuffing it back into the cloth bag. At the same time, she hurriedly left Huobeima's embrace. At that moment, she wanted to hit the wall. If you can't explain, don't explain, and what's with the cool talk? Ugh. She glanced at Huobeimo and accidentally noticed that his face was actually a little red. Huobei can be shy? However, before she could take a good look, Huobei had already turned around. He coughed twice and said, "Your personal preferences are your freedom, no need to explain." Personal preferences? Wenjiu really wanted to die where she stood. But just now she had said that she liked it cool, so what else could she explain? "I'm going to the office, help yourself to anything at home," Huobei said, and left the room. After he closed the door behind him, Wenjiu made the motion of banging her head against the wall. Ah, so embarrassing. Outside the door, Huobeima paused for a moment, and a faint smile curled the corner of his lips. Soon, Wenjiu got over the feeling of embarrassment. She was good at self-regulating. It's just a piece of cloth, what's the big deal? He and Huobeima, that's over, what's the point? Cough cough. After tidying up her personal belongings, she went out onto the balcony and stood there for a while, lost in thought. She looked out at the fresh flowers in the garden and the beautiful gazebo, and felt a little dazed. How had she ended up living in a big villa in the city of Baidu? How had she ended up living in the home of the famous CEO Hua? And how had she ended up pregnant with his child? Up to now, she still didn't know if she had made the right decision. But she had no choice but to forge ahead. At this moment, her stomach grumbled, and Wenjiu realized that she hadn't eaten breakfast yet. She remembered that before Huobeime left, he had specifically told her to make herself at home. As if he knew that she had been kicked out of her house, so he told her to feel free to make herself at home here? Regardless, with his words, she did feel much more relaxed. She went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. She thought that the CEO's refrigerator must be full of fresh ingredients, but she was wrong. The large refrigerator was empty, with just a few bottles of Coke and some eggs. Wenjiu didn't know that in addition to his identity as the CEO, Huobeima also had the identity of a bachelor. In the eyes of outsiders, he was unattainable and glamorous, but in fact, in private, without the care of a woman, he lived a particularly rough life. Looking at the empty refrigerator, Wenjiu thought that maybe it was because Huobeima didn't cook at home that the refrigerator was empty. She went to the nearby supermarket alone and bought fruits, vegetables, chicken, duck, fish, etc., filling the refrigerator. By the way, she cooked herself a bowl of tomato and egg noodles, and the kitchen instantly smelled of smoke and fire. This was also the first time in so many days that she didn't feel nauseous after eating. As long as she ate what she wanted to eat at the moment, it was not easy to get morning sickness. That afternoon, her best friend Luo Yining called. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you want to take a part-time job paying 300 yuan per hour tonight?" Luo Yining's voice sounded a little excited. "Yes." Wenjiu answered without hesitation. "I knew you wouldn't say no, you little money lover, ha." Although Wenjiu had 10 million yuan, she had a long-term care-dependent brother who needed expensive treatment, and she was used to being thrifty. She always felt that money earned by herself was more secure, so of course she would earn as much as she could. Besides, an hourly wage of 300 yuan was not low. Since the art studio only taught students, it only opened on weekends, so during the week she would take on some part-time jobs. Her best friend Luo Yining was the only child in her family and was constantly being watched over by her parents. She was the typical type who had everything arranged for her by her parents from childhood. In order to avoid her parents, she often sneaks out of the house under the pretext of working part-time. Therefore, she often works part-time with Wenjiu. As for the main job, Luo Yining's parents want her to become a teacher, but she, who yearns for freedom, has no dedication at all and does not want to become a teacher for the people. Therefore, she has been delaying finding a formal job. Fortunately, her family gives her a lot of pocket money, so she doesn't need to do things she doesn't like because of money. "You didn't even ask me what kind of job pays such a high hourly wage?" Luo Yining asked. "What kind of job?" She asked back. "A hot pot restaurant is opening and they need a few pretty girls to be greeters. We both have pretty faces, hee hee. Behave yourself." Wenjiu laughed. "Why should I behave myself? We were the two flowers of the school back then. If it weren't for you, I would have been the school beauty, and I can't hide my good looks. Thank you for elevating me. Oh, candidate for school flower, say, what time is it at night and where is the address?" Chapter 8, so it was her who took the initiative. "I'll send it to you later." By the way, the owner of the restaurant, whom we both know, is Zhao Feng, who courted you in high school. After graduating from junior college, my family gave me money to start a business and opened a restaurant, which cost an estimated several million. Wen Jiao was silent for a while. Luo Yining teased, Jiao, you're not regretting it, are you? You're not refusing this job because of this relationship, are you? What's there to regret? It's been so many years, and you know he's a rich kid, he's probably long forgotten about me. Why would I refuse to make money because of this? Besides, it's just a part-time job, not like I'll be working under him permanently. Okay, I'll send you the address on WeChat. 7 p.m., don't be late. Not long after the phone call, Luo Yining sent the address. The restaurant was located 2 subway stops from Baido Mingcheng, which was quite close and in the bustling area of the city. She secretly felt that fate was really unfair. Zhao Feng, who used to be at the bottom of the class, was now living a more comfortable life than most of the academic elites. He had just graduated and already opened a large restaurant. A restaurant costing millions of dollars was a dream that many people could never achieve after working hard their whole lives. However, his family is wealthy, so he doesn't have to worry about the cost of trial and error. At 7 o'clock that night, Wen Jiao arrived on time. As soon as Luo Yining saw Wen Jiao, she exclaimed, Jiao, you've been gone for a month. What's wrong with you? Why have you lost so much weight? Has she lost weight? Wen Jiao asked in return, while feeling her thin cheeks. Recently, because of the severe first trimester pregnancy reaction, she has been unable to eat or sleep well, and she has indeed lost a lot of weight. However, Wen Jiao didn't know that she had already lost so much weight that it was obvious. Is it because you're worried about your brother? I've told you before, no matter what, you have to eat properly. If you collapse, your brother will be even more miserable without anyone to take care of him, right? Luo Yining frowned. Wen Jiao wanted to say something, but she couldn't hide the pregnancy from Luo Yining for long, and this was clearly not the time or place to talk about it. And, last time at that restaurant, you drank too much and kept saying you wanted to sell your body. I couldn't persuade you, so I had to drag you to a nearby hotel and get a room. I know that your brother's situation is troubling you, but it's already happened. We can only do what we can, and we can't do anything stupid in the future, understand? Wen Jiao still doesn't know the reason why she lost her virginity. After Luo Yining said this, some fragments of the memory of her disappearance finally appeared. At that time, her family forced her to go on a blind date with an old man, and she was under so much pressure that she drank a bit too much that night. Because she couldn't hold her drink, she made a fool of herself. She was so helpless that she joked to herself that she would sell herself to a man. If Luo Yining hadn't taken her to a nearby hotel, no one knew what would have happened on the spot. But Luo Yining also didn't expect that after she was dragged home by her meddling mother, the drunk Wen Jiao would run out of the room alone and enter the wrong room. As a result, she got pregnant with a stranger's child. As Wen Jiao's memory gradually came back to her, she thought back to that time and felt ashamed when she realized that it seemed like she had pestered Hua Beima and had literally put the handsome guy to sleep. It's getting late, let's change into our welcome outfits first. Wen Jiao changed the subject. Together with Luo Yining, she changed into her welcome outfit and, together with the other 8 beautiful welcome hostesses, stood in front of the store wearing bright red cheongsams, which became a beautiful sight on the street. The attention of passers-by was drawn to them. At this time, 3 cars pulled up, the lead one being a Mercedes-Benz. All 3 cars stopped in front of the store, and the boss, Zhao Feng, got out of the Mercedes-Benz. He was accompanied by a dozen people, all of them classmates from high school, both male and female. One of the girls, who was still in the same dormitory as Wen Jiao, was named Xiao Wanru. After many years of not seeing each other, Xiao Wanru, the ugly duckling from the past, seemed like a different person. She was wearing a delicate red strapless dress, waist-length big waves of blonde hair, red nail polish, and every move she made was full of femininity. It seems that her living conditions have improved a lot over the years. I remember that when I was a student, Xiao Wanru always pretended to help Zhao Feng give Wen Jiao gifts, but in fact, she was the one who liked Zhao Feng. As soon as she got off the bus, she took Zhao Feng's arm affectionately, and the two looked like they were dating. The other students followed behind them with compliments. As the group walked over, the greeters said in unison, "Welcome." One of the students, Zhou Mingming, saw Luo Yining and Wen Jiao in the welcoming party at a glance and exclaimed, "Oh my god, why are you two working as waitresses in Brother Feng's restaurant? Isn't today a class reunion? Didn't Brother Feng ask them to come? I didn't expect that the former class flower is doing so badly. When Brother Feng was courting her, she was as proud as a peacock. I guess she is regretting it now. Everyone whispered. Everyone looked at Wen Jiao and Luo Yinin with obvious contempt in their eyes. Zhao Feng's pace then paused. When he tilted his head, he only nodded to Luo Yinin, then arrogantly entered the restaurant door, not even looking at Wen Jiao directly, let alone inviting these two old classmates to enter the restaurant together. Xiao Wanru was worried that Zhao Feng still had feelings for Wen Jiao. Seeing his attitude, she immediately raised her chin proudly. She followed him into the restaurant with a disdainful look on her face and a graceful posture. Vaguely, she heard Xiao Wanru say, "Brother Feng, should I say that you had poor judgment back then, or that she had poor judgment? At this age, she still doesn't have a proper job." Wen Jiao didn't feel anything about it. After all, during the years she had worked part-time, she had seen it all. She wasn't afraid of earning shameful money, but she was afraid of asking for help when she had no money. On the contrary, Luo Yinin looked embarrassed. She had received the job offer in a group chat with her classmates, because when Jiao had said that she would remember to call her if there was any work, and with an hourly wage of 300, she of course thought of Wen Jiao first. Looking back, she realized that the message in the group chat recruiting part-time workers had been posted by Xiao Wanru. This woman knew that Zhao Feng had invited a group of classmates to a private reunion, but deliberately recruited people in the group, obviously trying to make them both look ridiculous. After all, Xiao Wanru was in the same dormitory as Wen Jiao and the others back then. She often paid private attention to Wen Jiao's news, and naturally knew very well that Wen Jiao was taking on part-time jobs everywhere, so she expected her to take this big piece of pie, and Wen Jiao would definitely catch it. That was why she deliberately set up a trap to make fun of them. Seeing a group of familiar figures enter the store, Luo Yinin couldn't help but curse in a low voice. What the hell? We've fallen for Xiao Wanru's trap. The hourly wage of 300 is simply something she used to humiliate us. Look at her condescending attitude, it really pisses me off. Chapter 9, I hope General Hua doesn't have a girlfriend. Yinin, keep your voice down. We're just here for the part-time job. Who cares what people think of us, as long as the hourly wage of 300 yuan is real? Wen Jiao didn't really care. Over the years, she had endured all kinds of hardships to make money. This really wasn't a big deal for her. However, Yinin couldn't help feeling guilty about being humiliated in this obvious trap. Jiao, I'm sorry. I didn't know that Xiao Wanru was like this. If I had known, I wouldn't have taken this job. What do you mean you're sorry? It's foolish to turn down money. We can make 300 yuan an hour just by stopping at one station. I'd rather spend time making money than go to a half-hearted reunion with my classmates. We can make 1,000 to 2,000 yuan just by standing for a few hours, so what's there not to do? With Wen Jiao's comfort, Luo Yinin was able to get her mind right. At this time, as usual, Hua Beimo was working overtime at the company. He was a confirmed bachelor who usually just worked and worked. At this time, the voices of the company employees came in. Manager Chen, my wife just called and said she fell while doing the housework. She just got pregnant and is bleeding. She is alone at home now, and I have to go back immediately to take her to the hospital. But our team's planning case has not been completed yet. This project is very important. As the person in charge, aren't you afraid? Manager Chen pointed to the president's office. In a situation like this, I suggest you call an ambulance. Hubei Hima is a workaholic, and his employees naturally dare not slack off. On weekdays, everyone works desperately with him, and if the work within their remit is not completed, it must be finished with overtime. Who dares to leave before the boss? Unless you don't want to work anymore. The male employee glanced at the lit-up CEO's office. He was a little frustrated, but also worried about his pregnant wife. After some deep thought, he gathered his courage and said, Manager Chen, women are very unstable in the early stages of pregnancy. My wife fell while she was home alone. What if something happens to her? I still want to go back, is that okay? Hua Beimo's hand froze as he reviewed the documents. He suddenly remembered that he also had a wife who was in the early stages of pregnancy and was home alone. Although the two were not formally married, the fact remained that she was pregnant with his child. He had thought that even so, he had no obligation to take care of Wen Jiao. But for some reason, when he thought about the conversation between the employees, the image of Wen Jiao being home alone suddenly popped into his head. Was the early stages of pregnancy really that dangerous? She was home alone, and there was no domestic helper, so she probably wasn't doing housework either. What if she fell and bled? As he thought about it, he couldn't read a single word in the documents that followed. He simply closed the notebook and got up to leave the office. Seeing Huobei suddenly appear in the doorway of the office, the male employee, who was anxious to go home to see his pregnant wife, turned pale. The temperature in the office dropped suddenly, and everyone in the office held their breath for him. Everyone wondered if he was going to lose his job because he wanted to abandon his work and go home while holding such an important project. However, Huobei was as serious as usual. With his hawk-like dark eyes, he looked the male employee in the eye and said, "Go back, your wife and child are more important." The male employee's face instantly turned black. "No. President Hua, I know work is more important, but this is an emergency." He thought Huobei was speaking ironically, and he was so anxious that he stuttered. At work, Huobei has always been unsympathetic. In his eyes, nothing is more important than work, and his employees naturally agree with him. How could he possibly be considerate of his employees' families? So when Huobei said that his wife and children were more important, the male employee's legs went weak. "I'd better call an ambulance. Work is more important." The male employee hurriedly sat back down. "Didn't I tell you to go home? Can't you understand?" Huobei narrowed his deep eyes. The male staff member froze for a moment, wondering if Mr. Hua was serious. Manager Chen, who was standing nearby, also misunderstood and reminded him, "Go pack your things and leave." The male staff member's face turned pale, and if not for Manager Chen's words, for a moment he almost thought that Mr. Hua was really telling him to go home and be with his wife. He had no tears to cry, and he could only start packing his desk. Huobei was very speechless. It turned out that he was so inhumane in the minds of his employees. What should a woman pay attention to during the early stages of pregnancy? Huobei asked. The male staff member who was packing up froze for a moment. He looked stunned, a little unable to believe what he had heard. "Huh? What?" During the early stages of pregnancy, the fetus is still unstable and very vulnerable. During this period, you need to supplement nutrients, get enough rest, not stay up late, not lift heavy objects, etc. In short, pregnancy is really not easy for a woman, and her husband needs to spend as much time with her as possible. Although the male staff member did not understand why Huobei asked, he answered very seriously. He worked hard precisely because he had a small family to support. Therefore, when he talked about his wife and child, his eyes were full of tenderness. As Huobei listened to this, a sense of guilt welled up in his heart like never before. He had actually thought that a pregnant woman in the early stages of pregnancy looked no different from the average person and did not need special care. He also wondered how Wenjio was doing at home alone. While thinking about these things, he had no heart to work. He simply said to Bai Hua beside him, "I'll go home first, and I'll read the rest of the documents tomorrow." After taking a few steps, he turned to Manager Chen and said, "Give him 3 days off. The project he's working on isn't urgent at the moment." Everyone in the office looked at each other in surprise as they watched Huobei hurry away. No one could believe that one day, President Hua would actually leave work before them? And care about the personal matters of his employees? And thoughtfully give a male employee with a pregnant wife 3 days off? "Am I not being fired?" the male employee muttered. Everyone nodded in agreement. "No, Mr. Hua has granted you 3 days off." Someone whispered, "Do you think Mr. Hua might have a woman? I suspect he has a pregnant wife at home too." How could that be? A workaholic like Mr. Hua, who doesn't get close to women, would make a woman pregnant? Just because Mr. Hua doesn't get close to women doesn't mean he can't. Only Bai Hua, who knew the truth, looked calm. When Huobei hurried home, it was already past 8 p.m. The whole way home, he was filled with thoughts about what the male staff member had said. He was actually a little worried about an unexpected situation with Wenjio. As a result, the house was dark and there was no light. He went to her room, thinking that she had fallen asleep. Unexpectedly, the door opened with a gentle push, and the room was empty. Huobei knew that Wenjio had no home to go back to. At this hour, where could she possibly go? Maybe she'll be back soon. He returned to his bedroom, turned on the computer and prepared to get back to work. But for some reason, he was still a little worried about Wenjio in the early stages of pregnancy. He suddenly remembered that he had Wenjio's WeChat, so he took the initiative to send her a message. "Where are you?" Chapter 10, Daddy. Wenjio had been standing in front of the hot pot restaurant for almost 2 hours, and her feet had gone numb. At this moment, she took advantage of going to the bathroom to rest for a while. Perhaps it was because of the pregnancy, she felt a little weak. When a message from Mighty Man suddenly appeared on her phone, her face flushed a little, and she remembered that she had added Mighty Man as a note for Huabema because she was worried that she would not be able to find him. She quickly deleted the word tough guy and, after a moment's thought, replaced it with father of my child. But why had this guy suddenly sent her a message? Although she didn't know why he was asking where she was, she thought to herself that he was kind of her employer, so she answered honestly. I'm at a new hot pot restaurant on San Hua Road. Eating hot pot? Huabema frowned deeply. When Jill leaned against the sink, frowned, and thought to herself, Big boss, you really don't know the hardships of the common people. You actually think she's eating hot pot? Is there something, Mr. Hua? I'm working part-time. Huabemo's brows locked even tighter as he tried to ask when Jill what kind of part-time job she was doing and what time she would be home. However, it seemed that he had no position to ask these things. He has always been almost cold-blooded towards people and things, and no one has ever been able to interfere with his emotions. This is the first time his emotions have been swayed by a woman. No. As the father of a child, how can he not have a position to care about his wife and daughter? So he closed the computer and went straight to the underwater fishing restaurant on San Hua Road. When Joffa sent a message and waited for a while, but he didn't see Huabema reply, so he thought he was just asking casually and put his phone away. She washed her hands, tidied her hair, and was about to leave the bathroom when she saw Xiao Wanru suddenly enter. As former classmates, when she saw Wen Jiao, she didn't smile, but folded her arms, looking condescending, completely acting like the boss's wife. You were really blind in the past. You didn't even cherish Fengda's pursuit of you. Gee, you're really miserable now. As Xiao Wanru spoke, she deliberately played with the necklace she wore around her collarbone and showed off the ring on her hand. These were all gifts from Zhao Feng. In the past, she was a country bumpkin, but now she really exuded refinement. However, Wen Jiao didn't feel sorry at all. Back then, her life had endless possibilities, and she could not have humiliated herself by accepting a guy she didn't like. This was in the past for her. Come to think of it, shouldn't you be thanking me for not taking your finger? Wen Jiao gave a faint smile. Her face was expressionless, and there wasn't even a ripple in her eyes. Xiao Wanru felt like she had been humiliated instead. Upon closer inspection, Wen Jiao's small, palm-sized face was plain and unpainted, but it exuded a pure beauty born of her mother. Although she was wearing an inexpensive welcome suit, it made her look even more vulnerable, almost like the ceiling of pure desire. In comparison, Xiao Wanru, with her heavy makeup, looked vulgar and unbearable. There is nothing a woman fears more than dressing up only to find that she is not as good-looking as someone else without makeup. What are you so proud of? You have no education and no background, and you haven't noticed that Zhao Feng doesn't even bother to look at you? Xiao Wanru angrily said. Why would I want your boyfriend to look at me? Wen Jiao shook his head wordlessly, bypassed Xiao Wanru directly, and strode out of the bathroom. Xiao Wanru snorted twice and shouted at her back, I can only say that you are really pretending. On the surface, you don't care, but I don't believe it. No woman would miss a rich second generation like Brother Feng and not regret it. Wen Jiao quickened his pace and left, not bothering to respond to Xiao Wanru at all. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked into the hallway, a dark shadow suddenly enveloped him, pinning him against the wall. Wen Jiao was startled and looked up to find that the person blocking his way was Zhao Feng, the restaurant owner. I never thought that after getting rid of Xiao Wanru, I would run into Zhao Feng again. Do you regret it? Zhao Feng leaned against the wall with one hand, breathing heavily. It seemed that he had just had a drink, and the breath that sprayed out smelled of alcohol. Zhao Feng was 1.78 meters tall and looked okay. Mainly because his family was well off, he had cultivated a very good temperament. However, when Jill had been in close contact with Huabema before, and compared to her child's father, Zhao Feng was so ordinary that he could be ignored. Plus, she never liked Zhao Feng in the first place, so how could she possibly regret it? I heard that you've had a hard time over the years. Since you were just a young girl back then, I can forgive you for being blind in the past. Come on, I'll give you another chance. Be my woman. Zhao Feng spoke condescendingly. It was as if he were giving Wen Jiao a handout. It seemed as if he felt that after experiencing the hardships of life, Wen Jiao would definitely accept him with tears of gratitude. Zhao Feng, I made it very clear to you a long time ago, didn't I? I don't like you, I never did, and I never will. Wen Jiao rejected him clearly. I like your stubborn nature, and I believe that in the past you really didn't like me, but now that you have nothing, do you still have a reason not to like me? Zhao Feng raised his smile, looking determined to win. Wenjiu was speechless and helpless. So, if you don't do well, you don't even have the right to dislike someone? Right, aren't you with Xiao Wanru now? What do you mean by hitting on me behind her back? Wenjiu sneered. I don't even like her. In all these years, apart from you, I haven't met any woman who can make my heart flutter. As long as you promise to be with me, I'll break up with her right away. Zhao Feng said with a longing face. Wenjiu gave him a glance from top to bottom, and felt that the man in front of him was really disgusting. You'd better stay with Xiao Wanru, you two are perfect for each other. Wenjiu's voice fell as the bathroom door opened and Xiao Wanru walked out with a dark expression on her face. She never imagined that the man she had so humbly licked for so many years still had Wenjiu in his heart. On the spot, she wanted to kill Wenjiu. Zhao Feng probably didn't expect Xiao Wanru to be in there either, and another failed confession made him look distraught. After recovering, his face was full of a carefree expression, as if he didn't care at all about Xiao Wanru's feelings. Wenjiu didn't want to get involved in their relationship. She had made her feelings clear, so she turned her head and tried to leave. However, Xiao Wanru suddenly grabbed her wrist and shouted, Wenjiu, you bitch, we were classmates, but you actually seduced my fiancé. How can you be so shameless? Hey, don't spread rumors. Who's seducing who? Don't you know? Wenjiu was afraid that Xiao Wanru's extreme behavior would hurt the baby, so she quickly protected her pregnant belly. After Xiao Wanru yelled like this, many people came running, including former classmates who also gathered around. When Luo Yinyin heard the sound, she hurriedly rushed to the crowd. Zhao Feng saw so many people gathered around, and when he thought about Wenjiu just refusing him, he was furious. So he changed his words and said, Wenjiu, it's useless for you to regret now, I already have Wanru. Chapter 11, Are you really Wenjiu's husband? Wenjiu was full of disbelief. She had seen what was called a thief shouting at the police. Wenjiu is shameless, isn't she? She repeatedly rejected Brother Feng at the beginning, and now that she sees him become the boss, she shamelessly wants to be his mistress again. If I were her, I would indeed regret it, but no matter how much she regrets it, she will never be as shameless as her. Former classmates pointed and laughed. Wenjiu was really angry and amused. Seeing this, Luo Yinyin hurriedly squeezed into the crowd. She defended Wenjiu, hey, don't talk nonsense. I know Jiuzhen very well. She would never do such a thing. There must be a misunderstanding. What do you know? People in poverty have no dignity or bottom line. After all these years, Wenjiu has become like this. Do you think my brother Feng would still look at her? Xiao Wanru said with contempt. Seeing everyone despise Wenjiu, Luo Yinyin was desperate. Jiu, you better explain yourself. Luo Yinyin still believed in her best friend. Of course, even if Wenjiu really did such a thing, she believed that Wenjiu was desperate and would still defend her to the end. Although a clear conscience is clear, reputation is also very important, and Wenjiu naturally could not let these people destroy her reputation. Now, her reputation is not just hers alone. It also involves her child's father, Hua Beimei. Even if it's not for herself, she should explain herself to Hua Beimei. Zhao Feng, I'm already married. To put it mildly, my husband is 100 times better than you. Do I need to seduce you behind his back? If you don't know what you look like, do you want to go look in the bathroom mirror right now? Someone like you is also worthy of me seducing you? Wenjiu really finds this extremely laughable. Zhao Feng's face suddenly turned black. After all, Wenjiu had just firmly rejected him. And you, Xiao Wanru, don't you know what kind of person Zhao Feng is? If you think this kind of man is precious, just lock yourself away with him, don't let him out, and I wish you a happy marriage for the next 200 years, but don't involve me. Wenjiu said this in a decisive manner. Xiao Wanru had just seen everything with her own eyes, so naturally she knew that Wenjiu had indeed rejected Zhao Feng. However, they didn't believe that Wenjiu had a husband who was 100 times better than Zhao Feng. If such a man really existed, would Wenjiu still be working part-time as a receptionist? Wenjiu, is it fun to deceive yourself? If you really have a husband, then your husband is really incompetent. In this hot weather, he makes you stand at the door to welcome guests and make money to support the family. The onlookers nodded in agreement. Wenjiu is really stubborn. If she can find a husband who is better than Brother Feng, I will perform a handstand and eat shit. Add me. And me. Just as the crowd was besieging Wenjiu, a voice with a strong magnetic force and a sense of its own authority came. Why don't you eat the hot pot properly? when so many people are fighting to eat shit? Hearing the voice, Wenjiu froze. She wondered if she had been pretending to be calm since just now. Surrounded by a crowd of people, she was actually hallucinating? Otherwise, how could she hear Huo Beima's voice? His voice was very distinctive. She turned her head and sure enough, she saw Huo Beima standing in the crowd. Everything around her instantly dimmed, and his tall, handsome figure attracted the attention of everyone in the restaurant. "Oh my god, it's Huo Beima." After a diner recognized him, he exclaimed. "What? Huo Beima from the Huo group? Wow, President Huo is really handsome, isn't he? What is President Huo doing in such a humble restaurant?" Zhao Feng also followed everyone's gaze, and when his eyes fell on Huo Beima, his entire body stiffened. It was obvious that he was outshone in every way, whether in terms of height or appearance. A few years ago, Zhao Feng had accompanied his father to a charity dinner, and back then, he had seen Huo Beima pass by in the distance, surrounded by bodyguards. He never expected to have the opportunity to see Huo Beima again in his life, let alone that Huo Beima would come to the restaurant he owned. Seeing him up close today, Huo Beima's handsome appearance was even more three-dimensional and intuitive, and it was extremely overwhelming. Zhao Feng was considered a young rich man, but the Zhao family was not even comparable to the Huo family, not even in the same league. In full view of the crowd, Huo Beima walked straight up to Wenjiu. Zhao Feng froze. Why are you here?" Wenjiu was speechless. In the astonished gazes of the crowd, Huo Beima took Wenjiu's hand directly. Even Wenjiu was stunned. "Wife, what are they doing around you?" Before Wenjiu could explain, Xiao Wanru, who was standing nearby, spoke up first. "Are you really Wenjiu's husband? No wonder she has fared so badly over the years, it turns out she has found a useless gigolo. You've come at the right time. Your wife has just seduced my fiancé. How are we going to resolve this?" Xiao Wanru naturally did not know Huo Beima, and thought the reason for the commotion in the crowd was because of the handsome appearance of the man in front of her. She has always only loved money, and she has never been moved by handsome men. But Huo Beima is such an exceptional handsome man, and she has never seen him before in her life. She has to admit that even her heart skipped a beat. So, she is even more convinced that Wenjiu must have been charmed by the pretty boy and lost his heart, so he willingly goes around making money to support his family. She felt that this was one of the reasons why Wenjiu worked so hard for money. However, in front of this man, she felt a little guilty when she said that Wenjiu had seduced Zhao Feng. Just now, when Wenjiu was surrounded by a group of people questioning and humiliating her, she didn't panic much, and she even responded with sharp words. But for some reason, she couldn't bear to hear anyone say such things about her in front of Huo Beima. In her anxiety, she couldn't even say a word. Huo Beima sensed Wenjiu's anxiety. He squeezed her hand and gave her a soft look, signaling her to relax. Receiving Huo Beima's gaze, Wenjiu felt much more at ease. He had the ability to calm her emotions. Then, Huo Beima asked coldly, "Who is your fiancé?" Xiao Wanru pointed to Zhao Feng beside her. Zhao Feng had always acted in a pompous manner in front of his classmates. When Huo Beima's cold gaze swept over him, he felt very guilty, as if he had been caught stealing. "My wife seduced him? Are you sure?" Huo Beima asked back word for word. His cold and fierce gaze revealed disdain. The entire restaurant fell silent. Zhao Feng blushed. He never would have guessed that Wenjiu really had a husband, and that her husband was the famous Huo Beima. How could Huo Beima's wife seduce Zhao Feng? It was not as if he was blind. Similarly, everyone around them felt the same way. If Huo Beima had not appeared in time, everyone would have believed that Wenjiu had been unwillingly seducing Zhao Feng. But Huo Beima stood off to the side, dwarfed by the situation. "Mr. Huo, this is a misunderstanding. We are just classmates. I just drank too much. It was my fault for thinking that a toad like me could eat swan meat. I'm sorry." Zhao Feng hurriedly apologized in a low voice. Chapter 12, he developed a strong sense of protectiveness. Zhao Feng had drunk a lot, but he was not stupid. In the capital, especially those whose families run businesses, who would dare offend Huo Beima? Unless they didn't want to make a living anymore. "Brother Feng, why are you afraid of him? He's just taller, isn't he? What's the use of looking fierce if you have no money and no power?" Xiao Wanru frowned in puzzlement. "Shut up. Are you trying to get me killed?" Zhao Feng rebuked in a low voice, and then whispered, "Husband Wenjiu, it's Huo Beima, the CEO of Huo Group." What? Even if Xiao Wanru had never met Huabime before, she had heard of this famous figure. How is that possible? If he really is Huabime, why would Wenjiu need to be a receptionist? She would never believe it. Zhao Feng quickly covered Xiao Wanru's mouth with his hand to stop her from speaking. He hurriedly continued to apologize, saying, "This woman is ignorant, so please don't blame her, Mr. Hua." Wenjiu's heart felt like it had been stabbed by an arrow, causing her to feel a vague pain. Over the years, she has indeed earned every penny of her hard work. She was used to living this kind of life, and it didn't matter if people looked down on her, because this was her life. However, she found it very objectionable to be told this in front of Huabime. She didn't want Huabime to know the bad side of her life, even though she had never cared about what others thought in the past. "No matter what my husband's status is, I don't think there is anything to be ashamed of if you earn your money legally and don't steal or rob," Wenjiu said with gritted teeth. Huabime looked at the delicate woman beside him in surprise. Due to the various early pregnancy complications, she had become much weaker, but there was an unyielding stubbornness in her pale, paper-like face. He actually felt the desire to protect her. Immediately, Huabime narrowed his dangerous dark eyes and looked at Zhao Feng angrily. He looked down on him, poking Zhao Feng's forehead with his hand. "So, did my wife seduce you?" Zhao Feng shook his head like a rattle, saying repeatedly, "No, no." "Then apologize." After Huabime finished scolding him, he slapped Zhao Feng directly in the face. If it weren't for the fact that Xiao Wanru was a woman, he would have slapped her as well. Zhao Feng's face was red from the beating, and he didn't dare to object. The usual swaggering in front of his classmates was gone. He hurriedly apologized to Wenjiu. "Wenjiu, I'm really sorry. Just now, I was unwilling to admit that I couldn't get you in the past, so I deliberately embarrassed you. It's all my fault. I hope you can forgive me." Xiao Wanru was shocked and speechless. Was this still the spring breeze and contented rich second-generation Zhao Feng she knew? It was only then that she realized with hindsight what a terrifying existence Wenjiu's husband, the legendary Huabime, was. For people like them, it is already incredible to have the opportunity to get close to Huabime once in a lifetime. As a result, the unattainable Huabime has become Wenjiu's husband. The classmates who were watching the commotion whispered to each other. It turned out that it was a thief crying out for help. If Wenjiu didn't have an incredibly powerful husband, wouldn't she have been wronged for nothing? It's so annoying, and this is what should happen to some bullies who bully others because of their power. Looking at Huabime and Zhao Feng, one tall and one short, one imposing and the other at a loss for words. The scene looked so much like an old man lecturing his wayward son. Wenjiu, who had been very angry, nearly laughed when he associated the two. All he could say was, "The wretched have something to be wretched about. Zhao Feng really deserves it. Hubby, thank you for sticking up for me, but never mind, I don't want to argue with someone who doesn't matter." Wenjiu blinked. Although the words "my husband" were meant for others, they made Huabime pause. Her soft voice, when she called him husband, gave him an indescribable feeling of sweetness. "Jiu, although there is no shame in earning a legal income, but your husband is rich, and your family does not need you to work. From now on, you just need to rest assured and take care of the baby," Huabime said with a superior air, and publicly picked Wenjiu up in his arms. Wenjiu felt her body grow light as she fell into Huabime's strong embrace. She stared at him in disbelief, and when their gazes met in his deep eyes, it was as if an electric current had entered her palm, numbing her entire body. She quickly averted her eyes, afraid to meet his deep, peach blossom eyes again. Was he trying to save her face? Or was he worried that her grandmother would discover the truth? Was that why they were putting on an act in front of everyone? Compared to her words of husband, Huabime's series of actions made Wenjiu blush. No matter what, she could only cling to Huabime tightly now. As the nominal Mrs. Hua, she couldn't afford to lose face. "Husband, you know, I'm used to a busy life, and I'll be bored if I don't find something to do," Wenjiu whispered. "Don't sneak out to work behind my back in the future, okay? Your health is important." The two acted as if they had no one around. Later, Huabime ignored the stares of the people around them and walked straight out of the restaurant with Wenjiu in his arms. Everyone was talking about it. Wenjiu is actually pregnant with Hua's child? Won't she be able to live a life of luxury for the rest of her life? Not only a life of luxury, but a life of endless wealth and glory. Everyone was jealous, and Xiao Wanru's face turned green with envy. Only Luo Yinian looked dazed the whole time. She asked herself, "I'm in contact with Wenjiu every day, and we even video chat when we don't meet. When did Wenjiu get a husband? And she's pregnant? How is this possible? But everything in front of her eyes didn't seem fake. When Wenjio was just standing guard to welcome guests, she repeatedly looked like she wanted to vomit, and she thought Wenjio wasn't feeling well. Could it be that she's really pregnant? When everyone in the restaurant gave way for the two of them, only Luo Yinin chased after them. Outside the restaurant door, Luo Yinin called out, "Zhou." It was only when someone called Wenjio that Huo Beima stopped in his tracks. However, he was still holding Wenjio and turned to face Luo Yinin. At this point, there were no more outsiders present, and Wenjio didn't want to continue the act. Besides, in front of her best friend, she was really embarrassed to be in a man's arms, so she struggled to get out of Huo Beima's embrace and get to the ground. After leaving Huo Beima's embrace, her little face was still burning hot. Luo Yinin, who was usually so carefree, was actually a little hesitant this time. She had a bunch of questions, but she was afraid of Huo Beima's aura, so they were all stuck in the bottom of her eyes. What she wanted to say was rolling in her eyes, ready to burst out. When Jiobang pulled Luo Yinin aside and whispered, "I'll explain to you later." Luo Yinin had no choice but to suppress her curiosity. She could tell that Huo Beima and Wen Jiobang's relationship seemed to be more than just that. She was afraid of saying the wrong thing, and if she offended someone important, it would be bad for her good friend. After all, just now, the way Huo Beima lectured Zhao Feng really surprised her. After the two of them whispered to each other, Wenjio took Luo Yinin and introduced her to Huo Beima, saying, "Mr. Hua, this is my good friend Luo Yinin." When introducing her good friend to Huo Beima, she seemed very insecure. She wondered if he would care who her best friend was. "Just tell me her name." Unexpectedly, when facing Zhao Feng and the others, Huo Beima felt great disgust, but towards Wenjio's best friend, he was very friendly. Although he still maintained his usual aloof manner, he politely nodded slightly and said, "Hello, I am Huo Beima, Zhou's husband." Chapter 13, Unable to resist, he explained to him. Wenjio's face almost burned after he finished introducing himself. He never expected him to give him face like this, to treat his good friend with such respect, to remain aloof towards the opposite sex while still being polite. Wenjio was really grateful for the respect that Huo Beima had given him. "Yinin, it's getting late, I'll go back first, we'll get in touch later. By the way, don't do anything, we'll find them to settle the bill later." Wenjio instructed Luo Yinin. Luo Yinin nodded. If Huo Beima hadn't come to the rescue today, Wenjio would have been humiliated for nothing. Even if she had added points to her words with her wit, it wouldn't have changed the fact that she was inferior. Naturally, she couldn't continue working there. Wenjio left with Huo Beima first. The car was very quiet, and neither of them spoke. The intimacy they had just shown in front of others was gone, and they returned to their less familiar relationship. "Mr. Hua, thank you for your help just now." Wenjio broke the silence. At an intersection waiting for the red light, Huo Beima, who was driving himself, asked in return after stopping the car, "Are you short of money?" Wenjio embarrassedly nibbled her lower lip. She had already received 10 million from Huo Beima before, so it would be hard to explain if she was still short of money. "Mr. Hua, whether I'm short of money or not has nothing to do with you." Wenjio answered in a low voice. "You are pregnant with my child. I cannot let you run out of money during your pregnancy, nor can I allow you to risk the life of your child. From now on, don't go out to work, I will transfer you the money." Huo Beima's expression darkened, his tone was not open to discussion. After a pause, he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his dark eyes narrowed slightly, and he said coldly, "And, don't forget your current identity. During the contract period, you are Mrs. Hua, so be mindful of your influence." Wenjio's face turned pale. After learning the truth about that night from Luo Yinin, and remembering how proactive she had been, would Huo Beima really think that she had tried to seduce Zhao Feng that night? Perhaps, he had only unconditionally stood by her side and helped her tonight to protect Mrs. Hua's reputation? Speaking of that night, it was really good of him to take responsibility. If she needed money again, she would be embarrassed to keep asking him for it. Besides, 10 million is really a lot of money. If it weren't for my brother's illness, I wouldn't have taken the money. "Mr. Hua, my main job is in an art studio, which is very safe and will not affect the baby. I'm not short of money, I just want to earn a bit more. But I promise I won't take any more part-time jobs. You've given me enough, so there's no need to send me any more money." We agreed not to interfere with each other's private lives. Wenjio answered seriously. Huo Beima had a lot he wanted to say, but was stopped in his tracks by the sentence about not interfering with each other's private lives, and his face instantly turned dark. It was only then that he remembered that the two of them were only in a contractual marriage. It seemed that he had overstepped the mark. The green light came on, and Huobei restarted the car, and the cabin once again returned to silence. When Jiu weakly explained, "Mr. Hua, I really didn't seduce that male classmate tonight." Her little face burned again. Even she didn't know why she was explaining to Huobei. Anyway, she didn't want him to mistakenly think that she was the kind of woman who seduces men everywhere. After all, that night, she was the one who took the initiative. If she didn't explain, it would really be easy to make people mistakenly think that she was very promiscuous. Under the street lamp, the gloom on Huobei's face suddenly disappeared, and his brows gradually returned to a flat appearance as if they had been gently stroked. After returning home, the two went to their respective rooms. When Zhou's phone rang once, and she found that it was a transfer initiated by Luo Yinyin, a total of 1,500 yuan. Immediately afterwards, she sent a message. "Jiu, this is tonight's salary. I thought it would be difficult to get tonight's money, but I didn't expect Zhao Feng to transfer it on his own initiative just now. Although we only stood for 2 hours, he paid us the full 5-hour salary. The guy was so scared that he kept begging me to say a few nice words to you. Ha 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 ha." When Jiu unceremoniously clicked to receive the payment, her gratitude towards Huobei grew even more. "From now on, I won't take on any part-time jobs," she replied. "You little money grubber, you suddenly don't want to take on part-time jobs? Are you really married to that President Hua? And you're pregnant?" Luo Yinin's gossipy soul had been burning all night, and she really couldn't hold back anymore. "We tied the knot, but it was just a fake marriage," when Zhou and Luo Yinin always told each other everything. "What? A fake marriage? Then the pregnancy must be fake too, right? I knew it. You two were acting so polite when you were alone together, but it turns out it's not real." Luo Yinin was a little disappointed. She was ready to start rooting for the couple. After all, they look so good together. "The pregnancy is real, but once the baby is born, we won't have anything to do with each other anymore." "What? The baby is real? You two getting married was fake, so how did the baby come about? Was it an accident? When did you hook up with that perfect man behind my back?" Who would have believed that Luo Yinin was even more excited than Wen Jiu at this moment? After all, she had originally been worried that such a beautiful man as Wen Jiu would really marry an old man just to pay for her brother's treatment. In her opinion, if the pregnancy was real, then there was no such thing as a fake marriage. "Last month, I got drunk and went to the wrong room, and that was that." The next second, Luo Yinin called directly, and her high-pitched voice came from the other end of the phone. "What? Then I'm the matchmaker. Luo Yinin, what are you doing making such a scene in the middle of the night? You're going to scare me to death." Right, you're now a noblewoman plus pregnant woman, I really can't afford to scare you, so, are you two considered to be a marriage with a child? Like those arranged marriages you see on TV? Wen Jiu pursed her lips. "Suddenly I'm a little hungry, I'll go make something to eat." After hanging up the phone, Wen Jiu gently opened the door, afraid of disturbing her neighbor Huobei. She didn't even dare turn on the lights, only turned on the flashlight on her phone, and tiptoed downstairs. Once she entered the kitchen, she opened the refrigerator door. The ingredients she had bought were still there, untouched. She probably felt a sense of security when she saw a refrigerator full of food, as she had often been punished by going hungry as a child. Of course, these were all discounted items, and she only bought more when she saw special offers. Moreover, she only bought foods that had a long shelf life, such as meat. If she didn't finish eating it all today, she was going to put it in the freezer. At this time, she really wants a bowl of hot and sour soup, so she takes out the ingredients such as pork skin, eggs and tomatoes from the refrigerator and starts to make it. Hubei on the second floor has just finished taking a shower and is about to rest when he receives a call from his grandmother. "Grandma, why are you calling in the middle of the night when you're not sleeping?" Hubei says helplessly and lovingly. "Grandma is just worried that you won't be able to take care of my granddaughter by yourself. You know, in the early stages of pregnancy, your appetite will be poor, so you should eat small meals frequently. And remember to take her out for a midnight snack. And, you need to hire a maid in your house. My granddaughter can't be left unattended. If you really can't handle it, then you two can move back to the main house and live with Grandma." Huobei's movement of lifting the quilt came to a halt. When Zhou's fragile little face appeared in his mind. "I understand. You go to bed early." Chapter 14, feeling a pang of concern for her. Huobei still preferred to be free. His grandmother had a bunch of servants and a personal doctor at her side, so there was no need for him to worry. Therefore, he had no intention of moving back to the main residence. After hanging up the phone, he tilted his thin lips and shook his head in a light smile. His grandmother always treated him like a child. He got up and was going to go next door to ask Wenjiu if he wanted something to eat. Unexpectedly, it was dark everywhere. The lights in the hallway of the Huabema residence are always on all night, but tonight, for some reason, they were all off. The darkness made him very uncomfortable. He groped in the dark to turn on the lights, but slipped on the floor and fell down the stairs, with his butt and lower back pressing against the steps. He swung down heavily until he grabbed the handrail and stopped falling. This was the first time he had fallen so badly in his life. Wenjiu in the kitchen only heard a loud bang, as if the ceiling had collapsed. She was so scared that she hurriedly walked to the kitchen door and looked out, but she couldn't see anything in the dark. After that loud noise, there was no more movement. "Is there anyone there?" Wenjiu asked in a small voice in the direction of the darkness. At the corner of the stairs, Huabema's handsome face was wrinkled together in pain. He saw Wenjiu through the gaps in the railing, but he didn't want Wenjiu to know that he had just slipped down the stairs, even if it hurt like hell. Facing her inquiry, not to mention answering, he didn't even dare to move, for fear that Wenjiu would discover that he, who was 1.88 meters tall, was hiding at the stairwell. Wenjiu, with a puzzled expression, withdrew her head and returned to the boiling pot. Earlier, when she was browsing parenting apps, she read an article mentioning that some pregnant women would experience auditory hallucinations due to mental stress. Could it be that she had just experienced auditory hallucinations? Otherwise, what had collapsed in the middle of the night? It took Huabema a while to compose himself before he walked downstairs. In the kitchen, the dim light cast a hazy glow, and the smoke from the fire curled up into the air. The usually cold kitchen suddenly felt warmer with the addition of a girl in an apron busily going about her work. Huabema placed a hand on his lower back. His butt and waist were both aching. He coughed twice to fake a cough, but Wenjiu didn't notice him until then. "Ha? Are you hungry too, Mr. Hua? I made a lot of sour and spicy pork skin soup. How about we eat together?" Wenjiu asked. Huabema walked slowly into the kitchen as normally as possible. Even so, Wenjiu felt that Huabema's walk was a bit strange today. "Are you not feeling well?" Wenjiu couldn't help but ask. "No." Huabema let go of the hand holding his waist and stood next to the table. If he didn't walk or sit down, naturally the pain would go away. "Oh, by the way, just now there seemed to be a noise outside as if something had rolled down, like the ceiling had caved in." It was a loud noise. "Did you hear it?" Wenjiu asked to make sure she wasn't really hearing things. "Did you hear it?" "No, I didn't hear it." Huabema wiped his unnatural hand across his nose. Wenjiu muttered, "Then I'm done for, my hearing things is getting pretty serious." Huabema continued to act as if nothing had happened. He asked, "Did the lights in the hallway trip? Why are they all off?" "No, it's a waste of electricity to leave so many lights on, so I turned them off. It saves a lot of money over the night," Wenjiu replied. At that moment, Huabema almost vomited blood. Why is this girl's mind full of making money and saving money? She almost killed the father of her child. He took a deep breath and continued, "Don't turn off the hallway lights in the future, the family doesn't lack money." He imagined the consequences if Wenjiu had fallen just now. Even if you don't lack money, you shouldn't waste it like this. Thrift is a virtue. Wenjiu divided the cooked soup into 2 bowls and put it on the table. "You yourself are also, you don't turn on the lights in the dark, what if you fall?" The more Huabema thought about it, the more scared he became. "I'm not stupid, I'll use a flashlight and walk slowly, how could I fall?" Wenjiu didn't think so. Huabei was very angry, but he didn't want to lose his temper. If he said he had just fallen, wouldn't that make him sound like Wenjiu, who had rolled down from the ceiling? "Anyway, don't turn off the lights in the future," Huabei said sternly. Wenjiu didn't know what Huabei had just been through, but she could tell that he was angry, so she nodded hurriedly and said, "Okay, I won't turn them off next time." She sat down at the table and invited Huabema to have some pig skin hot and sour soup together. "Mr. Hua, would you like some? I happen to make too much." Huabema shook his head. He had originally come out to ask Wenjiu if she wanted something to eat, but seeing that she had already made some, he let it go. After a while, the pain in his wound finally subsided. While Wenjiu was drinking the soup, he casually opened the refrigerator. He didn't expect that the refrigerator, which was usually empty, was full of ingredients. Beside him, Wenjio was wearing pajamas, with her long black hair casually tied up. She was drinking soup with a satisfied expression, and her beautiful profile was pleasing to the eye. For the first time in his life, Huobei felt what a warm home was like. "Let's eat together. There's so much that I can't finish, it's a waste to throw it away," Wenjio said with a slight smile. That smile, sincere and clean, made people feel like they were in the spring breeze. Huobei just realized that he had been so busy working tonight that he had forgotten to eat. So he slowly sat down and faced Wenjio. He lowered his head and took a sip. It was just the right amount of sour and spicy, very appetizing, and actually not worse than what the hotel chef made. Unexpectedly, she was such a good cook. Huobei couldn't help but raise his eyelids and take a long look at her as she drank the soup carefully. The next morning, when Huobei got up, Wenjio had already prepared breakfast. On the table were soy milk, beef patties, half-cut hard-boiled eggs, fruit, and flowers that Wenjio had just picked from the courtyard. Huobei usually just went straight to work. When he arrived at the company, the secretarial department would help order coffee and breakfast, and he had never really used the kitchen at home. Now, the dining room at home made him unable to stop looking. He stood outside the dining room, watching Wenjio concentrate on something with her head bowed. When he looked more closely, he noticed that she had been pricked by a rose thorn. Huobei took a deep breath and quickly dialed his grandmother's phone number. "Grandma, can you ask Auntie how to come over for a bit?" Huobei said. "Huh? You finally want to hire a maid? Are you worried that you can't take care of your daughter-in-law alone?" Okay, Grandma will ask your auntie how to come right away." Auntie Hao has been working as a maid in the main house for a long time, and she took care of Huobei when he was a child. He is more at ease having her take care of Wenjio at home, as she has extensive work experience and outstanding professional knowledge. After hanging up the phone, he entered the dining room. "Mr. Hua, you're up? Breakfast is ready." Wenjio had already removed the rose thorns from his hand and hurriedly hid the damaged skin behind his back. Huobei looked at the flowers and food on the table. Although it was not as rich as what he usually ate, the simplicity of it piqued his appetite. Wenjio had gotten up early to prepare it all. His heart ached. Someone who could do everything and was always rushing around must not have been properly protected, right? Chapter 15, Husband or First Name? Huobei glanced at Wenjio's slender body and said, "You are not here to be a maid. In a while, there will be a live-in maid to take care of your daily life." He originally thought that he would continue to live alone. Unexpectedly, her arrival would cause him to keep lowering his bottom line. He even moved out of the main house for freedom, and even distanced himself from his dear grandmother. Now, in order to take care of Wenjio, he is willing to let the maid live in the house. Take care of her daily life? Wenjio nodded blankly. Before this, she had never thought that she would become the one being taken care of. The main reason why she got up early and was busy was that she was used to cooking at home, for hygiene reasons and to save money. However, given the Hua family's means, she had nothing to say if they wanted to hire a maid. She positioned herself as someone who would try not to affect Huobei's life as much as possible. "Yes, Mr. Hua." Wenjio nodded obediently. "Also, Auntie Hao is the maid who took care of me growing up and is also the person my grandmother trusts the most. Her arrival at the house is equivalent to having an extra grandmother's spy. In front of her, you may need to change the way you address me, and also, I'm sorry to ask you to move into my master bedroom," Huobei said in a deep voice. The moment he called his grandmother and asked her to come over, he already knew what it meant. Wenjio is pregnant, and if he hires someone else to take care of her, he won't feel at ease. Therefore, he would rather have a grandmother's eyes and ears than take the risk of calling someone else. She would not allow the slightest mistake to happen to her child. Grandma is looking forward to the birth of the baby. He cannot let the 80-year-old keep being disappointed. No matter how good Grandma's health is, there are not many years left. "Move into your master bedroom? Then, how will you sleep?" Wenjio blurted out in shock. His face turned red as soon as the words left his mouth. "My room is not small, we can sleep separately." Huobei casually pursed his lips. "Then what should I call you in front of Aunt Hao?" Wenjio asked, and then muttered to himself, "Husband?" Huobei turned away, feeling a little heat in his ears. "Call me by my name. Baymo or Amo are fine," Huobei said. "Baymo? Amo? Wenjiao tried calling out. Removing the Hua surname and calling the other person by their first name was actually just as embarrassing as calling him husband. Wenjiao was uncomfortable, bowing her head, afraid that the other person would notice that she was blushing. Hua Beimo was also very uncomfortable and didn't dare to look Wenjiao in the eye. Growing up, apart from his grandmother calling him Xiao Mo, no woman had ever dared to call him by his name. The way she called him by his name in a soft, mellow voice felt like a small flame that had crept into his heart and was burning him with a tingling sensation. From now on, can I call you Beimo in front of Auntie Hao? Wenjiao asked. Not only in front of Auntie Hao, but also normally, so as not to give himself away in front of her. Okay. Wenjiao nodded. The air conditioner was clearly on, but the two of them felt a little hot. By the way, I've already eaten. These are leftovers for you. Now I need to go out. Wenjiao pointed towards the door. Today she had to go to the hospital to pay her brother's hospital bill. In addition, she had hired a caregiver before, and the caregiver's fee had not been paid for half a month. If she didn't show up, she was afraid that her brother would have no one to take care of him. Seeing that Hua Beima didn't say anything, she turned around and left. Unexpectedly, Hua Beima's eyes had been watching her back the whole time. Today Wenjiao was wearing a white dress, with her long, straight black hair tied up in a high ponytail, looking very fresh and pretty. He wanted to ask her where she was going, but it seemed like he was overstepping his bounds again. It wasn't until she was about to walk out the door that Hua Beima finally couldn't hold back any longer and called out to her. Jiao. Ha? When Jiao turned her head, looking at Hua Beima with confusion. This was the first time he had called her by her first name in private. She knew that because of Auntie Hao's arrival, he would probably call her by her first name from now on. Where are you going? I'll arrange for the driver to take you. No, I'm just going to the hospital, it's just across the street, I can walk there. Wenjiao replied. Hua Beima wanted to ask her what she was doing at the hospital, but it would really be rude to ask again. In the beginning, he was particularly worried that Wenjiao would disrupt his normal life, so he specifically added a clause to the contract about non-interference in each other's private lives. Now, why did he dislike this clause in the contract? It wasn't until Wenjiao's back disappeared from view that Hua Beima's gaze returned to the dinner table. He took a piece of beef patty that was steaming hot, took a small taste, and suddenly, a bright light seemed to be plated in the depths of his dark eyes. Wenjiao maintained her usual frugal style. The beef patty she made didn't have much beef, but it was better in terms of seasoning and cooking. Unlike the high-end food that Hua Beima usually ate, it had a different taste. It was the taste of a warm and loving home. After Hua Beima took a bite, he couldn't stop. He simply sat down and relished the food on the table, unable to stop eating. When Wenjiao arrived at the hospital, the nursing assistant Uncle Li exclaimed in surprise, "Little girl, I thought your family would never show up. This morning, I called your parents again, but they refused to pay. They even told me that if the hospital ran out of money for treatment, they would be notified to come pick him up. Alas, I see that your brother is such a young man, and it's really sad that you're just going to give up on him like this." In the hospital bed, when Nanji's three-dimensional features were still handsome, as if he were asleep. Once such a warm and sunny person, now he was hanging on by a thread with the help of machines. Wenjiao didn't dare to look at Nanji in the hospital bed, because if he looked at him one more time, he would not be able to hold back his sadness. "Uncle Li, thank you for your hard work. You take this 20,000 yuan first, and I'll leave my brother in your care." Uncle Li was even more surprised. "You mean, you're not giving up treatment?" He had thought that the day the Wen family showed up was also the day this young man was pronounced dead. "Well, I won't give up. I'll go top up the treatment fee right now." "That's good, but you also owe 4,000 yuan for half a month's care. You're having a hard time right now, so just settle the arrears, you don't have to pay so much all at once." "It's fine, I'm not that short of cash right now. Please, Uncle Li, take good care of my brother. Caring for a vegetable is much more tiring than caring for an ordinary patient. Many people are unwilling to take on this job. It is really hard to find a second caretaker for a vegetable who can earn 8,000 yuan a month. Moreover, this Uncle Li is also particularly enthusiastic and responsible." After Uncle Li collected the money, he couldn't help but ask, "I heard your mother say before that she wanted to set you up on a blind date. You wouldn't have married already, would you?" Uncle Li looked sympathetic. After he finished speaking, the family members of the patient in the next bed all looked over. Everyone had exchanged information about the Wen family's situation and knew that after this incident, the Wen family had been pressuring Wen Jiao to get married. Wen Jiao had met a good man, but when she thought that her marriage was not normal, that she was pregnant, and that everyone looked at her with pitying eyes, she inevitably felt sad, and her voice took on an uncontrollable wistful tone when she thought about the situation at home and with her brother. "Yes, I'm married," Wen Jiao answered. The ward fell silent, and Uncle Li muttered, "It's a pity." At that moment, the female family member in the next bed suddenly exclaimed, "Hey, hey, hey, your brother moved his hand." Chapter 16. He is the father of her child and also her benefactor. What? Everyone in the ward turned their attention to Wen Nanji. Wen Jojo was surprised to see that Wen Nanji's hand had indeed moved slightly twice in a row. "Brother. I'm Jojo. Can you open your eyes and look at me? Please wake up, okay?" Unfortunately, Wen Nanji only moved his fingers twice and there was no more movement. Those two movements seemed to have used up all of his strength. But it was also the first movement Wen Nanji had made in the 2 months since he had been declared a vegetable. Wen Jiao called out for a while, but seeing that Wen Nanji did not respond, she ran out of the ward with tears in her eyes. "Doctor, doctor." She went straight to the doctor's office. The doctor in charge of Wen Nanji, seeing the panicked Wen Jiao, hurriedly asked, "Has something happened?" "Doctor, I am the family member of Wen Nanji in bed 15. My brother just moved his fingers a little. Can you go over and take a look at his condition?" The doctor did not dare to neglect this matter and hurriedly followed Wen Jiao to the ward. After understanding the situation, the doctor said to Wen Jiao, "It is a good sign that the patient's finger moved. He just probably learned that you got married, so that's why he reacted. This shows that you are very important to him. You should come to the hospital more often in the future, talk to him more, and stimulate him a bit. Maybe there is hope that he will wake up." Even in his current state, he was still worried about her. He must feel that he has burdened her. If he had the power to control his life, he would rather die than let his sister marry someone else to pay for his treatment. In any case, at least this shows that he can hear her. "Okay, I understand. I will come to the hospital whenever I have time." Wen Jiao nodded while wiping away the tears from the corners of her eyes. This strengthened her resolve to treat her brother to the end. However, in his condition, the hope of waking up is still quite slim, and family members should not have too much hope. The doctor added. Wen Jiao's gaze dimmed. That day, Wen Jiao prepaid 200,000 yuan for treatment. Wen Nanji has been hospitalized for more than 2 months and has already spent more than 400,000 yuan. Since the location of his car accident was in a dead zone of surveillance, the driver fled and has not been caught yet, so he has to bear all the medical expenses himself. So far, Wen's parents have only paid a little of the upfront medical expenses. Since the doctor declared Wen Nanji a vegetable, they have refused to spend a single penny. For this reason, Wen Jiao has been footing the bill. Wen Jiao has only been working in the art studio for half a year, and currently earns just over 10,000 yuan a month. Although she has been working part-time in the past, she has not saved much money because she has been going to school at the same time. As a result, she owes 300,000 yuan in online loans and credit card debt. This debt is really a huge amount that would crush a young woman just starting out in society. Fortunately, she met Hua Beima, who gave her 10 million to pay off her loans and also prepaid her brother's next treatment. At this moment, she is financially stress-free. Thinking about this, she really is grateful to Hua Beima, who is not only the father of her child, but also her benefactor. Wen Jiao stayed in the hospital for a day before returning to the villa. As soon as she entered the door, she smelled the aroma of food. A kind-looking auntie saw Wen Jiao come back and bowed with a smile on her face, saying, "Hello, young mistress. I am the maid, Auntie Hao. I will take care of you and young master's daily needs in this household." "Hello, Auntie Hao." Wen Jiao then remembered that the family was going to hire a maid. Auntie Hao couldn't help but look at Wen Jiao up and down, with a smile on her face and an unmistakable fondness in her eyes. Her gaze was not unpleasant, but Wen Jiao felt very shy. When she heard from Grandma Hua that Hua Beima had gotten married, Aunt Hao was really curious about what kind of girl the child she had watched grow up with would find. He originally thought, like Grandma Hua, that Hua Beima would never marry, but fortunately, the girl was fresh and pretty, and she was pregnant with the Hua family's child. "Young lady, dinner is ready, you can eat. I'll go upstairs and call the young master." Wen Jiao then realized that Hua Beima had also returned. When Aunt Hao went to get him, she muttered, "The workaholic from before has become family-oriented with a family." The implication was naturally that Hua Beima would not have returned home so early in the past. When Jill wondered if Huabema had had little company at work today. It was unlikely that he had come home early just because of her, was it? She washed her hands and Huabema had already come downstairs. Little Long, was the baby good today? Huabema walked over with a smile, and the tall man naturally put his arm around her shoulders. She felt like she was surrounded by walking hormones, and her face suddenly began to heat up. And Hao on the side had a smile on her face. When Jill hurriedly agreed, the little thing was quite good today, it didn't make me sick. That's good, are you hungry? Let's go eat. The two entered the dining room together and sat down facing each other, just like a normal couple. Huabemo helped Wenjiu by putting food in her bowl, and Wenjiu accepted it gladly. Aunt Hao watched the loving scene between them and couldn't stop smiling. She secretly took a photo of them with her phone and sent it to the old lady of the main house, Granny Hua. Old lady, don't worry, the two are doing well. Granny Hua received the message and was overjoyed when she saw the warm scene of the two eating together in the dining room. Huabema naturally knew that Aunt Hao would definitely keep her grandmother updated, so he naturally treated Wenjiu well and naturally showed her concern. It got dark. Although Wenjiu didn't want to, she had to come to Huabema's master bedroom. While Huabema was taking a shower, she sat alone on the swing on the balcony, staring blankly at the garden. Thinking about her brother's situation, she couldn't help feeling sad. Everything she had experienced as a child was still vivid in her mind, but the person in the world who cared about her the most might never wake up again. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice when Huabema came onto the balcony. Why are you sitting here alone? Aren't you afraid of the mosquitoes? No, there aren't any mosquitoes. It's just that the night view of the garden is beautiful and the flowers smell so nice. Wenjiu quickly wiped away her tears. Huabema noticed that she had seemed to be crying a moment ago and narrowed his dark eyes slightly. You went to the hospital during the day, didn't you feel well? He finally asked. No, I went to the hospital to see someone. Wenjiu didn't want to tell Huabema too much about her family. She didn't want to arouse sympathy, nor did she want to tell Huabema about the bad things in her family. You went for the whole day? Yes, it's someone very important, so I spent the whole day at the hospital with him. Wenjiu replied. In the darkness, Huabema's face fell. So, you were crying because of that person? For some reason, he felt strange and uncomfortable when he learned that she was sad for someone else. What kind of person is so important to her? Chapter 17. Mr. Hua, are you coming up to bed? Wen didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either, which was a clear indication that she was crying for that person. He realized that although he had gotten Wen pregnant, he knew nothing about her past. Was that person a man? Was he her lover? He took a deep breath and then asked, is it because you need money to treat that person? Wen looked at Huabema in surprise. She asked herself, did I say anything? Mr. Hua is so clever. She praised. The face, which had already been downcast, became even more gloomy under the cover of the darkness. So, he guessed correctly? She wouldn't have been desperately trying to earn money to treat the illness of a certain man, would she? And almost married an old man in his 50s because of it? Although he was sure that he had taken Wenjiu's virginity, it was also important that her heart was pure. You can sleep in the bed, I'll sleep on the sofa. Huabema's tone suddenly turned cold, and he turned around and went back to his room. Wenjiu was at a loss. It seemed that just now, he had praised Huabema for being smart. Could it be that her praise was so fake that it offended Mr. Hua? Wenjiu was pregnant, so even if she didn't want to sleep in Huabema's bed, she couldn't refuse. After returning to her room, she unceremoniously lifted Huabema's quilt and lay down in his bed. His bed was so big and soft, and the quilt smelled of his fresh body odor, which was as refreshing as clear tea and made her feel like she was being held in his arms. Thinking about the passionate night, she was also surrounded by the same scent, and her face in the quilt turned slightly red. At this moment, Wenjiu's phone vibrated. It was a message from Luo Yinin. Jojo, I have news about the specialist Dr. Ling Shui you are looking for. I heard that he will attend a party for the wealthy tomorrow, and the party needs a few waiters. Am I being nosy again? Wenjiu now had a different status, and Luo Yinin didn't know if she would still take this kind of work, or if she still needed to find Ling Shui. Of course you do, my good Yinin, you're amazing, you were able to find out where Ling Shui is. Wenjiu suddenly came to her senses. Ling Shui is an international expert in resuscitating comatose patients, but unfortunately, he withdrew from the medical field 2 years ago, and his whereabouts are still unknown. Wen Jiao has been looking for Ling Shuai for some time. If she can get him to treat Wen Nanji, there will be more hope for him to wake up. No matter what capacity she is in at this party, she must attend. She must find a way to get close to Ling Shuai. Hey. You know, I usually don't do anything productive, I just like gossip, so I have more information from the side door. See you tomorrow. Luo Yinyin invited Wen Jiao to join a work group. The group contained detailed notifications about the banquet waiter registration and work content. It seemed that the banquet was very private and the requirements for waiters were strict, with a lot of information to fill out. Wen Jiao carefully followed the steps instructed by the group leader to submit various forms, and only put down his phone after confirming that he had obtained the waiter position. Hua Beima, on the other hand, was lying on the sofa, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. This was the first time he had slept on the sofa in his entire life, and he felt very uncomfortable. What's more, he was inexplicably irritable. So that woman was only willing to give birth to another man's child because of another man? Mr. Hua, is the sofa too small? Do you want to come up and sleep? The bed is so big, we can put a pillow in the middle of the bed and we won't disturb each other. Wen Jiao couldn't help but say this when she heard a noise coming from the sofa from time to time. The main reason was that she could now concentrate on treating her brother's illness, thanks to her benefactor Hua Beimei. Therefore, she didn't want Hua Beimei to suffer a little bit because of her. No need. Hua Beimei said coldly, and there was no more noise. That night, Wen Jiao did sleep well. When she woke up, Hua Beimei was no longer in the bedroom. According to Aunt Hao, Hua Beimei had gone out to work early in the morning. Aunt Hao brought a nutritious breakfast, including a bird's nest soup. Wen Jiao had never wanted to eat these before, but thinking that she was carrying Hua Beimei's child, she decided that she had to eat well for the sake of the baby. Did you and Master Hua have a fight last night? Aunt Hao asked with some concern. No, why do you ask? Wen Jiao was puzzled. The young master looked quite unhappy this morning. I thought you had a fight, I'm glad it didn't happen. Wen Jiao was confused. It seemed that after their conversation on the balcony yesterday, Hua Beimo had been unhappy. She didn't know what she had done to offend him. No, someone like Hua Beimo shouldn't let her emotions be swayed, should they? I guess he was annoyed about something else. It was close to party time in the evening when the group announced the location of the party. The address was actually Villa 7, which was next door to Wen Jiao's house. Wen Jiao had promised Hua Beimei that she would not take on any more part-time jobs other than her work in the art studio. The party was being held next door, so if Hua Beimei saw her working as a waitress again, would it upset him? However, Hua Beimei had always been aloof, and he probably didn't know his neighbors well. As long as she didn't say anything, he would never know. Thinking about this, Wen Jiao told Aunt Hao that she was going for a walk and went out. At this time, Luo Yinyin sent a message saying that she had been caught by her mother and could not come out, and asked Wen Jiao to take care of herself. Wen Jiao had no choice but to go alone. Villa 7 next door had a similar floor plan to the villa where Hua Beimei lived. At this time, the banquet had not yet started, and the waiters arrived first to start preparations. A small stage had been set up on a large lawn, with the audience seats and food area next to it, and there was also a swimming pool nearby. After changing into her maid's outfit, Wen Jiao began helping with the decorations and plating. During this time, she chatted with the other staff members and learned that the owner of this villa was the Ling Shuai she had been looking for, and that today was Ling Shuai's birthday, and this banquet was equivalent to Ling Shuai's birthday banquet. However, it wasn't Ling Shuai himself who was hosting the birthday banquet, it was a few of his good friends. It wasn't until 7 p.m. that the guests began to arrive, but Wen Jiao still hadn't seen the villa owner Ling Shuai appear. Instead, she saw Hua Beima in the crowd. She was startled to see that Hua Beima was walking and chatting with a few young men, and to be precise, there was also a mature and beautiful woman among them. The woman was dressed in a fashionable and tasteful manner, and was the type of woman who commanded respect. Even Wen Jiao couldn't help but take a second look at her when she saw her. However, Wen Jiao was extremely guilty at this moment, and she could not care about anything else for a moment. She dared not look at the beautiful woman any longer, and she wanted to turn around and pretend to be busy. Unexpectedly, Hua Beimei glanced over, and when he saw Wen Jiao, he frowned slightly, and his pace then stopped. His gaze fixed on Wen Jiao's face, and obvious displeasure rose in his eyes. Wen Jiao hurriedly turned her head to the side, not daring to make eye contact with Hua Beimei. Unexpectedly, when her gaze turned to the other side, several familiar faces came walking towards her. Wen Jiao was extremely surprised. Her younger sister Wen Yingying led her parents, chatting and laughing, into the villa. Chapter 18, Old Hua actually likes this type. Our Ying is still better, she is filial, and at such a young age she was able to bring us to such a luxurious villa party. It was mainly because Brother Xiang was invited to perform that I was given a few tickets. Just eat and drink well here and don't say anything, that's all, Wen Ying explained. The Brother Xiang she referred to was the veteran star Xiao Xiang, who was very famous in the entertainment industry. He was 16 years older than Wen Ying, 19, and the two were now in a relationship. Wen Jianan and Jiang Qiulin were so proud that their daughter was dating a big star that they bragged about it to their relatives. Because of Xiao Xian's fame, they didn't care about the age difference between the two at all. While the three were talking, they noticed Wen Jiao, who was carrying a tray and wearing a maid's uniform. Her smile froze instantly. Wen Jiao never imagined that at this party, she would not only meet Hua Beima, but also them. Because of these three people, she even ignored Hua Beima's gaze, which seemed like he would eat her alive. Not far away, Hua Beima narrowed his dangerous dark eyes. Do you love him that much? In order to earn money to treat that man's illness, you secretly came out to work as a waitress? Lao Hua, what are you looking at? Several of Hua Beima's friends looked at Wen Jiao along with his line of sight. His close friend Lu Xingyu smiled and said, "Hey, this is the first time I've seen Lao Hu looking at a pretty girl. So he likes this type of plain Jane. Get lost." Hua Beima coldly scolded, not tolerating his friend joking in the slightest. Lu Xingyu quickly put a stop to the smile and dared not tease anymore. Unexpectedly, Hua Beima would lose his temper with a waitress. Next to them, Lu Xingyan, Lu Xingyu's sister, also looked at Wen Jiao. The siblings and Hua Beima had grown up together and knew him very well. This was indeed the first time they had seen Hua Beima looking at a woman. All along, she had also wanted to know what kind of woman could attract Hua Beima's attention. Unexpectedly, it was this type of pure and innocent woman like a little white rabbit, which was completely different from her glamorous and mature style. Wen Jiao could no longer care about Hua Beima. She saw the smiling faces of her parents, and her heart ached. It seems that they don't care whether Wen Nanji lives or dies, right? That's right, they're not even going to pay the medical bills or even visit the hospital again, so why would they care? Wen Jiao felt her nose tingle with sadness, for Wen Nanji and for herself. Why were they born into such a family? All their parents cared about was money. Mom and Dad, why is that disaster here? She's dressed like that, if Xiang and his friends find out that she's my sister, it'll be so embarrassing. And, didn't you say she got married and pregnant? Why is she still working here as a waitress? Wen Ying was full of disgust and avoidance. She was afraid that others would find out that Wen Jiao was related to them. Wen Jianan and Jiang Qiulin tightened their brows at once. You still said her husband has a driver, probably a rich man. I said, how could this disaster find a rich man? Sure enough, she was cheated into marriage by a gigolo and has to work part-time while pregnant. Jiang Qiulin angrily scolded Wen Jianan. If she could go back in time, she really wouldn't want to give birth to Wen Jiao. Ying, don't worry, your father and I will take her away from here today, even if we don't eat or play. Saying this, the couple walked straight towards Wen Jiao, and Jiang Qiulin signaled to her, come with me for a moment. Sorry, I'm working, I can't leave now. Wen Jiao said coldly. What's so inconvenient about it? I've already told you, while the child is still young, hurry up and go to the hospital to get it done. That man is so poor that you even have to work as a waitress when you're pregnant. How can you still not see through it? Jiang Qiulin directly grabbed Wen Jiao's arm and pulled her forcefully towards the door. For the first time in the past 2 months, Wen Jiao was so close to the specialist physician Ling Shuai. How could she be taken away like this? Naturally, she stood in place and refused to move. Let go of me, didn't you kick me out? How I live is none of your business, Wen Jiao snapped. You have no shame, but your sister does. Her big star boyfriend is invited to sing here today, and you are his sister, but you are working here as a waitress, how embarrassing. Get out of here first, don't make a scene here. Not only Jiang Qiulin, but Wen Jianan, who was standing nearby, also joined in the tug-of-war. The couple wanted to quickly take Wen Jiao away, and they didn't care about the stares of the other people. Wen Ying, on the other hand, stood on the side disgusted. Go and see what's going on over there. Lu Xingyu signaled to the staff beside him. This birthday banquet was a special one they were throwing for their friend Ling Shuai. Ling Shuai's condition was already not good, so naturally, no one should cause any trouble. Unexpectedly, before the staff could go over, Hua Beima actually walked towards the direction of the argument. Lu Xing'an and Lu Xingyu, the siblings, looked at each other with strange expressions in their eyes. They couldn't believe that Hua Beima would personally meddle in such trivial matters. Wen Jiu kicked a stone during the tugging, and nearly fell when Hua Beima's cold and annoyed voice shouted, "Let go." Wen Jiu turned around and met his dark eyes full of anger. Then, he reached out and supported her unbalanced body. Wang Jianan and Zhang Qiulin only stopped tugging when they met Hua Beima's sinister gaze, and they were scared when their bodies tensed at the same time, before letting go of Wen Jiu. "Who are you? We're disciplining our daughter, what's it got to do with you?" Zhang Qiulin snapped. Before, when they were at the Wen's house, Hua Beima sat in the car, and the two of them didn't get a good look at his face, so naturally they didn't recognize him. Hua Beima narrowed his dark eyes, unable to believe that these two people, who had cursed Wen Jiu as a disaster, were actually her parents. She couldn't help but think about the other day, when Wen Jiu seemed to have been driven out by her parents. Wen Jiu was extremely embarrassed. She really didn't want Hua Beima to know about her family, that terrible side of it, not at all. "Who gave you your tickets?" At this time, Lu Xingyu walked over with the staff. When Jianan and Zhang Qiulin saw that it was the staff who had arrived, and they were afraid of getting their young daughter into trouble, so they looked at Wen Yingying with a wordless glance. Wen Yingying, however, didn't want to come over and talk. "No matter who gave them the tickets, tell them to get out," Hua Beima said, word for word. Lu Xingyu was dumbfounded again. This birthday party was practically a mini-concert, and some tickets were indeed distributed to relatives and friends to liven things up a bit. It wasn't really appropriate to tell people to leave after they had been let in with a ticket, was it? But since Hua Beima had spoken, Lu Xingyu didn't dare say anything. "Go and find out who gave them the tickets," Lu Xingyu whispered to the staff member. Soon, Xiao Xiang himself ran over with a guitar. "Xiangge, didn't you give us the tickets? Why is that man telling us to leave?" Wen Yingying went up to him in a sweet voice. Xiao Xiang's scalp went numb when he saw that the Wen family had offended Hua Beima. "That's President Hua. You really are something, calling your parents over?" Xiao Xiang spoke in an embarrassed low voice. Next to him, Hua Beima asked Wen Jiu softly, "Are you okay?" Chapter 19. It seems that President Hua is quite concerned about Wen Jiu. Could this be the president of Hua's group? Hua Beimo? Wen Yingying asked in a low voice. "Who else but the big Buddha?" Xiao Xiang was furious. Wen Jianan and Zhang Qiulin also overheard what they said. Everyone in the city knows about Hua Beimo of Hua's group. Even the two elderly people knew about this person and suddenly turned pale. They wondered, our youngest daughter really has a lot of connections. The place she took them to was actually where they could meet the legendary Hua Beimo. It makes sense. Their lucky star of a daughter is now dating a big star, so she has directly crossed social classes. Isn't it normal to be able to meet the president of a wealthy family? At the same time, they also noticed that Hua Beima seemed to be quite concerned about Wen Jiu. "It's fine," Wen Jiu replied to Hua Beima. Hua Beima glanced at her stomach before letting go of her arm. From beginning to end, he kept a poker face, his displeasure written all over his face. Xiao Xiang hurriedly ran up to Hua Beima, his usual arrogance in front of the camera gone, half a head shorter, and without a trace of his star quality. He apologized repeatedly in a low voice, "Mr. Hua, I'm really sorry. I gave a few tickets to a friend and originally wanted her to ask some young people to come and liven things up. I didn't expect her to bring her parents, which really spoils the mood. I'll tell her to take the old people away." Xiao Xiang was only invited to perform, not as a friend of Hua Beima's. However, his image on screen was good, and since he was invited to perform, he would naturally give him face. He didn't say anything more. Xiao Xiang hurriedly turned back to Wen Yingying and said, "Little brat, you hurry up and take your parents back first, don't cause me trouble." "Xian, why did you tell President Hua that I was your friend? In private, aren't our relationships all public? You also know it's private, but this is President Hua. My private life, who cares? Also, don't go around talking about our relationship, it will affect my career." Xiao Xiang led Wen Yingying away, whispering to each other. Wen Jianan and Zhang Qiulin followed suit. After all, they didn't want to cause trouble for their youngest daughter, so naturally they stopped arguing with Wen Jiu. Before leaving, Wen Jianan glanced back at Wen Jiu and sized up Hua Beimo for a moment before speeding off. After Xiao Xiang saw the Wen family off, he returned to the performance. On the way home, Wen Yingying said with a face full of displeasure, "It's all that Jinx's fault. Every time we meet her, nothing good happens. Tonight, because of her, we lost our chance to get up close and personal with a celebrity from a wealthy family. I begged Brother Xiang for these tickets, and I'm so angry. She really is a jinx. Jiang Qiulin was even more convinced that Wen Jiao was a jinx. Only when Jianan kept thinking back to what had just happened. Wife, do you feel like that mister who looks familiar? When Jianan couldn't help but ask. What does he look familiar with? Before tonight, people like us don't have the chance to meet any CEO. Are you still dreaming? The day we kicked Jojo out, there was a handsome man in the car that picked her up. Why do I feel that the profile of that man looks quite similar to this CEO? Jiang Qiulin and Wen Yingying exchanged glances. Then, Wen Yingying said disdainfully, Dad, are you crazy about wanting your daughter to marry into a wealthy family? You don't mean to say that Wen Jiao's husband is Hua Bei Mo, do you? If he really was the one, Wen Jiao would still be there serving tea and water in a maid's uniform today? Exactly, and I don't know what kind of poor guy she found. She got pregnant and made her work. This brat has had bad luck since she was little, and she's not even thinking clearly. Jiang Qiulin scolded angrily. When Jianan thought about it and agreed. How could she think that Wen Jiao was carrying Hua Beima's child? It was really ridiculous. In the villa, Hua Beima drove the Wen family away and, with a stern face, turned and walked directly away. He didn't ask about or pay any attention to Wen Jiao's job as a waiter, which in turn relieved her. Because she hadn't yet met Ling Shuai, she couldn't leave no matter what. As soon as Hua Beima turned around, Lu Xingyu and the others followed suit and left. Only Lu Xingyan remained standing in place, taking a close look at her with those inquisitive eyes, making Wen Jiao feel very uncomfortable. Fortunately, she didn't say anything and followed the group. Wen Jiao returned to her job of serving tea and water. During this time, Hua Beima and his friends sat in front of the performance stage, chatting and drinking. They left for a while and then returned. When the group returned to chat again, their expressions became solemn, but Ling Shuai never appeared. At this time, the person in charge of the event walked over and said, Would anyone dare to deliver the cake to the birthday star? Wen Jiao's eyes lit up, but it was strange. What was so difficult about delivering a cake to the birthday star? Why did they ask if anyone dared? You all know about Mr. Ling, don't you? He really had a hard time. He was in a car accident when he was on a family trip as a child. His father died instantly and his mother became a vegetable. Originally born into a wealthy family in the clouds, it was shattered in an instant. Mr. Ling, the eldest son, fell into darkness from then on. Later, it was his relatives who encouraged him to study medicine. It was to revive his vegetable mother that he found the will to live. After unremitting efforts, he finally became an expert in reviving vegetative patients. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, his mother finally woke up, but she didn't live long. After his mother passed away, he never recovered and developed a serious depression. Over the past year, he has attempted suicide many times. Mr. Hua and the others are his close friends from childhood. Everyone has taken good care of him. Today's semi-open birthday party is also meant to cheer Mr. Ling up, but in the end, he didn't even want to leave his room, and just now he lost his temper with everyone. I also heard that he not only hurts himself, but also hurts other people. The waiters whispered to each other. Wen Jiao then gained a deeper understanding of Ling Shuai. Unexpectedly, the specialist doctor she had been looking for was so pitiful, and his condition was so bad. But did he know how many people needed him? Under these circumstances, naturally no one wanted to deliver the cake. The person in charge had a troubled expression on his face. But no matter what, this is a rare opportunity to get close to Ling Shuai, so she gathered her courage and said, Supervisor, can I go deliver it? Of course, but be careful and try to convince Mr. Ling to come out and watch the show. The supervisor explained. Wen Jiao nodded, and then she took the cake cart and followed the supervisor towards the hall. Look, it's that girl, she's quite brave, actually daring to deliver cake to old Ling. The supervisor should have told her about old Ling's situation, right? Lu Xingyu gave a sign. Everyone looked in the direction of Wen Jiao. When Hua Beima saw the slender figure in the maid's uniform, his eyebrows instantly wrinkled into a figure of 8. Chapter 20. Old Hua is taking advantage of the situation to pick up girls? Did the person in charge pay this woman extra? Is that why she went to deliver the cake? Since she knows the situation, has she forgotten that she is pregnant? In order to make money to treat that man's illness, she doesn't even care about their child? Suddenly, Hua Beimei straightened his shirt and stood up. He took a few strides towards the hall door. Hua! What are you doing? Didn't you see just now? Lao Ling simply refused to see us. Perhaps it would be better to send someone else, someone unimportant, to deliver the cake. Lu Xingyu got up and shouted. Although Hua Beimei believed that his good friend would not really hurt someone, he could not allow the slightest possibility of harm coming to his wife and child. Lu Xingyu's words did not work, and Hua Beimei did not even turn his head. He couldn't help but mutter, "What's wrong with Lao Hua today? He's a bit unusual. Could it be related to that girl?" It seems that both of tonight's unusual events were because of that waitress. Nonsense, if Lao Hua were someone who was easily attracted to women, would he still be a bachelor? Other friends said. Lu Xingyan chased after him, grabbed Hua Beimei's sleeve and said, "Beimei, what are you doing following him? Didn't we just agree to find someone unimportant to deliver the cake?" Shuai has always been very polite to outsiders, so maybe if she goes, Shuai will come out. Lu Xingyan is the older sister of Lu Xingyu. She is 5 years older than the boys in the group and is now 34 years old, but she is still single. The kids therefore jokingly call her an old maid who can't get married. However, she doesn't seem to have any plans to get married, and she doesn't want to meet other boys. Instead, she gets along well with Lu Xingyu and the others. Since she plays with them as a friend's sister, Hua Beimei also treats her as a sister. Since he was young, she has always called him Xiaoma like an elder, and he has long been used to it. "I'll go take a look," Hua Beimei replied. His gaze was always on Wen Jiu, and he followed him straight away. This was the first time Lu Xingyan had seen Hua Beimei like this, and she was sure it was definitely not because of Ling Shuai, but because of the waitress. She also chased after him. The person in charge took Wen Jiu to the door of Ling Shuai's room and stepped back. Wen Jiu knocked on the door and said inside, "Hello, Mr. Ling, I am the waitress responsible for delivering the cake. Can you open the door? This is a token of affection from your friends." Behind him, Hua Beimei's gaze swept across a trace of worry. He wanted to go over, but was stopped by Lu Xingyan. "Xiaomo, everyone has been knocking on the door in turns tonight, saying a lot of things, but Shuai refuses to open the door." "Let her try," Lu Xingyan said from the side. Hua Beimei calmed down and stared straight in the direction of Wen Jiu. Lu Xingyan said, "Maybe Lao Ling won't even open the door, so what danger is there?" Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, the door opened with a click. Wen Jiu was overjoyed. As she was about to push the cake cart inside, a hand reached out from inside the door and grabbed the cakes on the cart, smashing them down hard. They landed squarely on Wen Jiu's face. "Get out! Who told you to throw me a stupid birthday party? I said I don't want to see anyone, get out." Ling Shuai's voice was almost frantic. Wen Jiu's face and hair were covered in cake, and for a moment, she couldn't see anything. She didn't expect that after finally getting the chance to get close to Ling Shuai, it would turn out like this. Everyone around was shocked. Hua Beimei's face instantly sank. The person in charge hurriedly said, "Are you okay? Quickly pull the car back." Everyone gathered around. Lu Xingyan also rushed forward, and before Hua Beimei, who was standing nearby, could do anything, she took Wen Jiu's arm and said gently, "Little sister, are you okay? I'm really sorry. I apologize on Shuai's behalf. In a moment, I'll have the person in charge give you an additional 5,000 yuan as compensation." As she spoke, she prepared to take a wet wipe out of her bag to give to Wen Jiu. Unexpectedly, Hua Beimei directly grasped Wen Jiu's thin wrist. "Leave." He spat out a single word coldly. With a bang, Ling Shuai's door slammed shut again, and there was the sound of the door lock turning, presumably relocking it. However, Lu Xingyu and the rest of his friends' gazes were now fixed on Hua Beimei holding Wen Jiu's hand. Lu Xingyan in particular froze in his movements as he reached into his bag for a wet wipe. Is old Hua taking this opportunity to hit on girls? His friends whispered in surprise. "Xiaomo, let me do it. She and I are both girls, I'll take her to the bathroom to wash up," said Lu Xingyan. Hua Beimei's temples were bulging with veins, and his chest was rising and falling, but he ignored Lu Xingyan. At this time, Wen Jiu could not see the situation clearly because her vision was impaired, so she had to use her hand to grab the cake on her face. Not only was her vision impaired, but her hand was also covered in cake, making her even more disheveled. The next second, she felt her body become lighter, and she fell into the familiar and safe embrace of someone. The refreshing fragrance wrapped her up, and she reflexively gently grabbed his arm. Lu Xingyu and the others' mouths formed an O shape. This is definitely the first time, right? Hua Bei actually losing control because of a woman? I'll take her back first, and you guys take care of Lao Ling. He restrained his emotional fluctuations, hugged Wenjiao and left, without even giving a superfluous explanation. The friends at the scene were simply blown away. My goodness, did I hear that right? What did Lao Hua just say? Take her back first? Does that mean he already knew the girl? What does it mean to go back? Could it be that they are already living together? Then why is she still working here as a waitress? Lu Xingyu asked a series of questions that everyone at the scene wanted to know. Everyone shrugged their shoulders, indicating that they had no idea. Sister, even Lao Hua has found a girlfriend, and now you're the only one left, ha ha ha. Lu Xingyu mocked without mercy. Lu Xingyan's face turned slightly pale, and she forced a smile as she followed the departing backs of Hua Beima and the others with her eyes. Where did this girl come from? Lu Xingyan asked the person in charge. The person in charge hurriedly replied, these waitresses all applied through recommendations, and we only hired those who passed the interview. I'm not really sure where she came from. Upon hearing this, Lu Xingyan's face grew solemn. Back at home. When Hua Beimo entered the door with Wenjiao in his arms, Anhao was shocked to see Wenjiao, who was covered in cake. Young master, young mistress, what happened? How did it come to this? It's fine, just some nonsense for a friend's birthday. Hua Beimo replied indifferently. Young people nowadays really are something, how can they be so inconsiderate? The young mistress is still unstable in the early stages of pregnancy, it's very dangerous. At this mention, Hua Beimo's face grew even darker. He carried Wenjiao upstairs to their room. Chapter 21, A pregnant woman's emotional stability depends entirely on her husband's care. After the door closed, he carried Wenjiao directly into the bathroom and said, holding his breath, wash up. Thank you, Wenjiao said, burying her face in her hands as she washed her face. After she had brushed the cake that had gotten into her eyes off her face, her hands were also covered in cake, and it was oily and difficult to wash off. When she looked up, she saw her own disheveled appearance in the mirror. She had been caught smashing a cake in front of so many people, and it was indeed very embarrassing. Hua Beima glanced at Wenjiao, who was blushing in the mirror, and when he walked out of the bathroom, he closed the door behind him. After that, he went to the balcony and lit a cigarette. Hua Beima could smoke, but he didn't have a smoking habit. He was the type with strong self-control, and he would only smoke when he was in a really bad mood. On less than 3 occasions a year does he need a cigarette to chase away bad moods. When Jill finished her shower quickly and came out with her long, black hair still damp, wiping it with a white towel. She looked into the bedroom but didn't see anyone, so she stretched her neck and glanced out onto the balcony. The lingering smell of tobacco drifted towards her, and she just saw a figure in the armchair. The next second, Hua Beima's strong, large hand closed around her wrist. Mr. Hua. Wenjiao screamed in shock. She then realized that Hua Beima might be angry with her for going part-time despite the baby. I'm sorry, I promise this is the last time I'll take a part-time job. I really won't do it again. Besides, I'm being very careful to protect the baby, so it won't get hurt. Wenjiao thought that Hua Beima would only care about the baby in her belly, so she only needed to ensure that the baby was healthy. Hua Beimo breathed heavily and held her hand tightly for a while before finally asking, is that man really that important to you? Do you have to treat him? No matter the safety? No matter the dignity? Wenjiao was taken aback. She thought about it for a while. To her, Wen Nanji was such an important existence. Although all of her family members were still alive, Wen Nanji was the only real family member she had left. So she replied with certainty, yes. Hua Beima's heart felt as if it had been tied up and suffocated. He had never felt like this before. Unwittingly, the strength of his grip on Wenjiao's wrist increased a little. Wenjiao was in pain and wanted to pull her hand away, making a struggling motion. Only then did Hua Beima realize that he had hurt her and let go of her hand. He reached for the cigarette case on the coffee table and was about to light up a second cigarette when Wenjiao rubbed her wrist and explained, my brother was in a car accident and became a vegetable. My parents can't bear to spend the money on treatment, and if I don't look after him, he'll just die. I found out that Dr. Ling Shuai is a famous expert in resuscitating people in a vegetative state, so I took a part-time job as a waitress today, not to make money, but to find an opportunity to ask Dr. Ling to treat my brother. I never thought that Dr. Ling would be in this situation. I'm really sorry. Hua Beima froze in the act of lighting a cigarette, looked up at Wenjiao, who was standing in the backlight, and asked, your brother? Well, my real brother. I never thought my parents would be so heartless. After my brother was declared a vegetable, they stopped paying for his medical expenses. I had to find a way on my own. My brother was really very, very good to me. I don't want to give up. Wenjiu restrained her sobs. She didn't want Huobeima to know anything about her family situation. However, Huobeima was her benefactor, and since she had taken it upon herself to work part-time and almost got into danger, it was only natural that she should explain herself to him. Huobeima quietly put down his lighter and returned the cigarette between his fingers to the table. The stuffiness in his heart, which had been like a fog, instantly dispersed, and he felt suddenly enlightened. In the shadows, his thin, scarlet lips rose up inadvertently. It turned out to be her own brother. Images of her parents treating her harshly flashed through his mind, and his hands balled into fists. No wonder she was so desperate to earn money. At this age, a young girl should be carefree, love beauty and travel, but Wenjiu had instilled thrift into her bones. In the darkness, his deep gaze hid his heartache. Actually, you don't need to explain so much to me. That's your business. Just be careful in the future. No matter what the circumstances, you are forbidden to take on a part-time job. Huobeima cleared his throat and spoke in a tone that made it sound like it was none of his business. Wenjiu nodded and replied, well, then I won't explain in the future. Cough cough. Huobeima coughed twice, and his tone concealed an imperceptible tension as he said, it's best to explain some special circumstances. Wenjiu was a little confused. Should he explain or not? Huobeima simply changed the subject, was it your sister who was just with Xiao Xiang? Yes, why? Wenjiu asked back, puzzled. As far as I know, Xiao Xiang in real life is not what the audience thinks she is. Huobeima reminded. Wenjiu replied, thank you, Mr. Hua, for your reminder. Unfortunately, not only does she have a bad relationship with her parents, because her parents have been biased since she was young, Wen Yingying has never taken her seriously. Not to mention that she is too lazy to care about Wen Yingying, even if she were kind enough to remind her, the other person might not listen. In the evening, Wenjiu suddenly felt nauseous. She hurriedly lifted the quilt and got up, rushing into the bathroom. Over and over again, she felt very sorry for Huobeima, who was sleeping on the sofa. She kept holding back the feeling of wanting to vomit, but the sleepiness was gone. Huobeima hadn't fallen asleep in the first place. Seeing Wenjiu go to the bathroom many times to vomit, his attention was also on her. Later, Wenjiu endured the discomfort and stopped getting up, but inevitably she was restless and made a lot of noise. Are you feeling unwell? His voice was gentle in the darkness. Compared to last night's sudden coldness, it was like a different person. It's okay. Wenjiu replied. I'll go get you a glass of water, and by the way, I'll ask Anne Hao if there's any good way to deal with morning sickness. Huobeima got up and went downstairs. Soon, he led Aunt Hao into the master bedroom. After understanding the situation, Auntie Hao said with deep meaning in her words, young master, it is not easy for women in the early stages of pregnancy. Apart from eating some sour foods to relieve morning sickness, you should pay attention to supplementing nutrients. As for not being able to sleep because of this, you, as the husband, should comfort the young lady, for example, by hugging her and giving her a massage. This can all serve to calm her, at least make her feel better psychologically. A woman who has a considerate and caring husband will sleep well, look good, and naturally be healthy and beautiful. Aunt Hao finished speaking very seriously, but the room was incredibly quiet. Huobeima didn't look in Wenjiu's direction, but his ears turned a little red. He nodded and said, I understand. That's good, then. I'll go out first, and if there's anything else, just call me. A pregnant woman's emotional stability depends entirely on her husband's care. Aunt Hao beamed. After she left, Huobeima contemplated the situation for a while, then leaned closer to the bed, and his handsome face also grew larger in Wenjiu's field of vision. Aunt Hao seems to have a point. Huobeima said. Really? I'll give you a head massage to help distract you. Huobeima lay down next to Wenjiu at a distance. Chapter 22 This is my wife Wenjiu. Not allowing Wenjiu to refuse, he reached out and began massaging Wenjiu's forehead, gradually working his way to the sides of her temples. His palms were broad, the temperature just right, and the strength just right, which was very comfortable. Wenjiu had wanted to vomit, accompanied by a headache. However, she was really distracted. It was just that, in Homer's arms, she was inevitably embarrassed, especially as his hands seemed to carry an electric current as they gently rubbed and stroked, making her body feel weak. Nervous and restless, her palms were sweating. They had clearly agreed not to interfere with each other's private lives, so what did he mean by this? Wenjiu was daydreaming when Huobeima's voice came from above her. Go to sleep. Pregnant women shouldn't stay up late. She blushed suddenly. Huobeima was giving her a massage so that she could sleep well and nurture the fetus, but she was thinking about something else. She forced herself not to think about it, considering everything for the sake of the baby. Gradually, she regained her composure and finally fell asleep. Huobei felt her breathing gradually becoming steady, and he was about to get up and go back to the sofa. Unexpectedly, when Jill rolled over, her slender body shrinking straight into his arms, and her head resting against his chest, causing him to become distracted. Under the nightlight, Huobei inadvertently glanced down, and her sweet, side profile suddenly appeared in his line of sight, so stunning. Her skin was so soft, her eyelashes were long and thick, and when he looked down further, he saw her lips, which were slightly pale. Huobei couldn't help but feel his heart tighten. If he hadn't lost control that night, she wouldn't have to suffer the pain of pregnancy. He couldn't help but reach out and try to part the stray hair on her forehead. At that moment, when Josie muttered something in her sleep, Huobei's throat moved, and his swallowing sound was particularly obvious in the middle of the night. What was wrong with him? He couldn't help but lean closer to her, and even had the instinctive reaction of a man, restless and irritable, which made him even more irritable. He shook his head to stop himself from continuing to feel sorry for this woman. If it weren't for this accident, he was originally going to remain single until old age. However, even if they had a child, he would not change his original life plan. He didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps. Thinking about this, Huobeima slowly got up, covered Wenjiu's quilt, and then simply turned on the computer to work. It took a long time for his blood to calm down. Early the next morning, after answering a phone call, Huobeima turned to Wenjiu and asked, "Would you like to go to a friend's party with me tonight?" "It's next door." "Next door? To Dr. Ling's house?" Wenjiu asked excitedly. "You really want to see Ling Shuai?" "No. You know the situation, I still want to talk to Dr. Ling. He's not doing well, I'm not sure if he'll come." Wenjiu's eyes lit up, implying that Ling Shuai might still show up. "I'm free today, I can go to the party with you." Wenjiu readily agreed. Huobeima nodded. Yesterday at Ling Shuai's house, he took Wenjiu away in front of his friends, and now the group of friends has exploded. Lu Xingyan initiated the party and asked Huobeima to bring Wenjiu. Although Huobeima and Wenjiu are in a contractual marriage, Wenjiu is pregnant, and her big belly will be obvious to everyone. It is better to bring her along. In the evening, the villa next door, number 6, is the residence of Lu Xingyan's siblings. To be precise, this house is in Lu Xingyan's name. Her explanation for buying this villa is that it is for the convenience of taking care of Ling Shuai. Because of this, Lu Xingyu also lives here frequently. Wenjiu only realized later that Huobeima did not live here alone, and that his good friends lived next door, but he was naturally solitary and usually did not associate with them. Perhaps Lu Xingyan also knew Huobeima's personality, and would not choose to have a party at Huobeima's house. In the courtyard, everyone was barbecuing and drinking, and even guessing Wenjiu's identity. Anyway, when did old Huo finally get a girlfriend? I was so curious that I didn't sleep well all night. Lu Xingyu couldn't wait to gossip. It's not even certain that she's his girlfriend. I've always thought that Huo might have problems in that area. In Shaokan, one of Huo's friends, agreed. As he finished speaking, Huobeima's voice came from the door, "You're the one with problems." Everyone looked in the direction of the sound and saw Huobeima and Wenjiu appear together. They all widened their eyes. Wenjiu blushed when she heard this. After all, she knew very well that Huobeima not only had no problems in that area, he was also very strong. Even if she hadn't experienced it before, she could sense it. "Hi." Everyone greeted each other, and their gazes fell on Wenjiu's face at the same time. "La Hua, what's this girl's name? Should we call her sister-in-law or?" Lu Xingyu asked first. Among the 5 of them, except for Lu Xingyan, the other 4 men were all the same age. Among them, Huobeima was the oldest, so if he had a woman, it was only right for his brothers to call his wife his sister-in-law. Only Lu Xingyan looked up and down at Wenjiu. From her hairstyle to her neck to her hands. However, Wenjiu was wearing a simple dress that she had bought online, and it was already the best-looking item in her wardrobe. Apart from the dress, she wasn't wearing any jewelry. She felt uncomfortable when she noticed Lu Xingyan's gaze. Since yesterday, she had felt that Lu Xingyan's eyes were looking at her strangely. After Hua Beimei led Wenjiu over and introduced her to everyone, he said, "My wife Wenjiu is pregnant, so please take good care of her." "My goodness. Pregnant? Well done, Lao Hua." Yin Xiaokang sounded as if he had heard something extraordinary. Lu Xingyu and the others looked as if they had just been served a shocker and didn't know how to react. An unexpected pregnancy? How come there's been no word of it? They haven't even given us any wedding candy. They must have gotten married without getting married. Lu Xingyan bet they weren't married. They've already got their marriage certificate, they're a legal couple. But my wife doesn't want to have a wedding while she's pregnant, we'll have it after the baby is born. Lu Xingyan's face changed slightly, and his expression became unnatural. "Sister-in-law, sit down, don't stand on ceremony with us, we've been good friends of the Lu family since we were kids, I'm Lu Xingyu." Lu Xingyu was the first to invite Wenjiu to sit down. Wenjiu then learned that Lu Xingyan and Lu Xingyu were the Lu group's two golden children. Lu Xingyu was a notorious playboy who relied on the family business and did not work hard. He played around with various female internet celebrities, while his sister was the opposite. At 34, she had never been in a relationship, and everyone called her an old maid in private. Lu Xingyan is beautiful and has a hot body, and she has many suitors, but she is single-minded in her career and seems to have no interest in men. Instead, she gets along well with Lu Xingyu's friends. In addition to these two siblings, Yin Xiaokang and another Xiaojiyu are also famous playboys in the capital. Wenjiu was inevitably a little nervous after listening to their introductions. "Miss Wen, which family are you from? I'm really curious how you could be seen as worthy by Xioma." Lu Xingyan asked with a smile. Wenjiu looked awkwardly at Hua Beimei next to her, a little worried that his identity would cause him to lose face. Chapter 23, Pregnant so soon? A bit fierce. Unexpectedly, Hua Beimei stretched out his arm, embraced her shoulders, and replied for Wenjiu, "Sister N, she is not the daughter of any family, she is my wife, Mrs. Hua." Lu Xingyan's expression froze, and she smiled awkwardly twice. However, Yin Xiaokang, who was standing nearby, exclaimed, "My goodness, old Hua has also started to dish out the dog food, I really can't stand it." Indeed, old Hua dishing out the dog food to me is no different from a sow suddenly jumping up a tree, ha! Lu Xingyu directly and mercilessly mocked. "That's enough of you." Hua Beimei's face sank. For some reason, he didn't want Wenjiu to know that he had no emotional experience. After all, he was a 29-year-old man, and if she knew that night was his first time, I wonder what she would think? "Don't mind us, sister-in-law. We're usually so blunt, and we don't mean any harm," Xiaojiyu explained. Wenjiu smiled, indicating that it was fine. "Lao Hua, aren't you going to tell us? When did you and sister-in-law meet? You got pregnant so quickly, that's a bit fast." Lu Xingyu raised an eyebrow and smirked. Wenjiu's face suddenly turned red. Hua Beimei shook the glass in his hand and said softly, "There's nothing I can do. When fate comes, you can't stop it." He gulped down half a glass of wine in one go, then turned to Wenjiu in his arms and said, "Isn't that right, Mrs. Hua?" Wenjiu hadn't drunk any wine, and when she met his dazed gaze, she felt a little dizzy. "Yes." She was very cooperative. As the two of them looked at each other, Lu Xingyan interrupted, "Xiaomo, what brand is your wife wearing? Is it the latest model? I've never seen the same one before." Lu Xingyan paused, then added, "It's quite nice." She herself was wearing a custom-made V-neck dress from a famous brand that highlighted her figure, with exquisite makeup and expensive jewelry, but she said Wenjiu's dress, which looked a bit wrinkled, was quite nice. The gazes of the several guys then fell on Wenjiu's dress. Wenjiu's dress was bought online for less than 100 yuan. Although it was quite pretty, the material and design of the dress naturally could not be compared to that of a famous brand, and it was entirely supported by Wenjiu's appearance. Hua Beimei frowned. Even he felt uncomfortable with Lu Xingyan's focus. Wenjiu's clothes were of average quality and obvious. Unexpectedly, Wenjiu replied generously, "I bought it online. Just like Miss Lu, I thought the clothes looked quite good, so I got them." Wenjiu seemed to be smiling as she answered. In fact, from just now until now, how could she not notice Lu Xingyan's inexplicable hostility? The other person called her Miss Wen, so she called her Miss Lu in return. The other person tried to avoid being rude by saying that the dress looked good on her, but she was actually making fun of her shabby appearance. So she took the opportunity to say that she bought the dress because it looked good. A simple sentence resolved the awkwardness that Lu Xingyan had deliberately created. Hua Beimei didn't expect Wenjiu to react so quickly, and couldn't help but raise the corners of his lips. Lu Xingyan then exclaimed in surprise, "No way, Bamo, you let Ms. Wen wear clothes bought online? This skirt would look better with some jewelry. You're both married, don't tell me you didn't even get Ms. Wen a piece of jewelry. You also didn't explain to us why Ms. Wen was working as a waitress at Shuaishuai's birthday party yesterday. You two aren't faking your marriage, are you? Am I right in order to fool grandma?" A cunning light flashed in the bottom of Lu Xingyan's eyes. Wen Jiao suddenly understood why Hua Beima pretended to be in love even in front of his friends. It turned out that there was such a formidable person in this group of people, who could actually tell from her appearance. It was also possible that Lu Xingyan paid more attention to her? Hua Beima frowned, pondering how to reply. Unexpectedly, Wen Jiao smiled and replied, "No, Beima respects my freedom of dress. I personally feel that clothes should just be comfortable to wear." "Sister, are you sick? Who cares what our sister-in-law wears? Would Lao Hua mistreat his own wife? You're not jealous because Lao Hua got married before you, are you?" Lu Xingyu asked suspiciously, then turned to Wen Jiao and explained, "Sister-in-law, don't mind my sister. My father always told her that she had to get married before Lao Hua did. Lao Hua suddenly got married, and the pressure is on my sister, the spinster who can't get married, so she's obviously jealous." Everyone laughed. Hua Beima took the opportunity to drink and, through his fingers, took in Wen Jiao's attire with the corner of his eye. A girl really needs to dress up nicely. He didn't like people making fun of Wen Jiao anymore. Wen Jiao herself wasn't bothered by this. Over the years, she had met all kinds of people. She had long since become accustomed to sarcasm and ridicule. From time to time, she tilted her head and looked in the direction of the courtyard gate. "I thought Ling Shuai would show up, but he hasn't even shown up at this hour. It seems he's not coming. Xiaojiao, I was wrong just now. I'm probably really jealous that Xiao Mo got married before me. Don't mind me." Lu Xingyan suddenly called her by her first name in a familiar manner. "Sister Anne is so outstanding, isn't it a matter of minutes before she gets married?" Wen Jiao also changed her address according to the other person's address. From the conversation between the two, Lu Xingyan already noticed how clever Wen Jiao was. At least, she found it difficult to make Wen Jiao lose face in public. "By the way, I'll show you around inside. I just bought some new dresses. I have a party the day after tomorrow. You have such good taste, so help me decide which one to wear. They boys are talking about boys' stuff, so let's talk about girls' stuff." Lu Xingyan enthusiastically got up and invited her. Wen Jiao had sensed that Lu Xingyan had been unfriendly since yesterday, but she was not afraid of anything. She let her speak alone, so there must be a reason. It so happened that she also wanted to know the reason why the other person was targeting her for no reason. This Lu Xingyan is the sister of Hua Beima's best friend, and to Hua Beima, she is like a sister as well. Logically, there should be no such hostility. "Okay." Wen Jiao got up generously. After Lu Xingyan led Wen Jiao up to the second floor, she took her into her master bedroom. The two of them chatted as they entered the walk-in closet. Lu Xingyan's walk-in closet was as enviable as a large bedroom. Fortunately, Wen Jiao has always been frugal, and she doesn't feel anything about such a large closet and designer bags. She thinks that as long as her body and hair are well maintained, and her clothes are simple and clean, as for bags, as long as they can hold things, that's fine. However, she will choose high-quality and well-designed bags that are just as good-looking but not cheap. When Lu Xingyan opened the closet of formal dresses, Wen Jiao noticed that there were many shoes on her shoe rack, which were actually very similar to the ones on the shoe rack in Hua Beima's house. It seems that not only are they from the same brand, they are more like matching pairs. After this discovery, Wen Jiao looked around and saw that many of Lu Xingyan's clothes and hats were the same as those in the Hua Beima family. Wen Jiao's heart lurched. With so many matching pairs, could it be that Hua Beima and Lu Xingyan are not in a relationship? It doesn't seem like a coincidence. Chapter 24, You Can't Fall for Someone You Shouldn't. Could it be that she targeted her because she accidentally got pregnant with Hua Beima's child and forced them to break up? After all, Lu Xingyan is really feminine, and this plump sister type is something that many little puppy dogs simply cannot resist. Just imagine, if she were a man, she would also like the Lu Xingyan type. Xiaojiao, help me see what you think of these dresses. By the way, Xiao Mo likes girls to wear white, what do you think of this white one? Lu Xingyan asked. Wen Jiao was a little lost in thought. Thinking about the beautiful sister in front of her, and that Hua Beimo might be her boyfriend or have been in a relationship with her, she actually felt a little uncomfortable. "Jiao, what's wrong with you? Lu Xingyan waved her hand in front of Wenjiu's face. Wenjiu then came back to her senses and said, "What does Beimo's preference in a girl's clothing have to do with you, Xingyan? Isn't the important thing what color you like yourself?" Lu Xingyan replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, but coincidentally, I've always liked white, so let's choose the white one." Between the lines, it seemed to imply that Beimo liked her. Wenjiu's expression couldn't help but change a little. After Lu Xingyan had decided on the dress, the two returned to the bedroom. Wenjiu noticed at a glance that her bedroom had an exquisite photo wall. On the wall were many photos of Lu Xingyan's childhood, including many photos of Lu Xingyan and her siblings hanging out with Beimo. It had to be said that Beimo was really good looking. Even in the photos, he stood out from everyone else. She saw him at once and couldn't help but look at him twice. Lu Xingyan noticed Wenjiu's gaze on the photo wall and said with a smile, "These are all photos of me and the others from when we were little. Look, isn't Beimo cute when he was little? He used to like hanging out with me all the time." Wenjiu took a closer look and realized that among the photos on the wall, there were the most of Beimo. When he was young, Beimo's smile was bright and dazzling, unlike his current gloomy appearance. In one of the photos, Lu Xingyan was carrying Beimo, who was about 3 or 4 years old. It was obvious that their relationship was very good. Although Lu Xingyan was 5 years older than Beimo, this set of photos made it feel like the two were childhood sweethearts. These photos are from a long time ago, and Beimo doesn't have them at home. "I guess he's forgotten about them," Wenjiu said nonchalantly. Lu Xingyan's smile froze on his face, and then he took a deep breath, as if he didn't want to pretend anymore. "Miss Wan, although Beimo doesn't admit it, I know that you two are in a fake marriage. You'd better withdraw before I tell Grandma the truth, or else you'll suffer the consequences," Lu Xingyan warned. "Miss Lu, didn't you just hear what Beimo said? I'm pregnant, how could it be fake?" Wenjiu had already accepted the money and promised to put on a good show, so of course she wouldn't admit the truth just because the other person said a few words. "You got pregnant using despicable means, didn't you? Don't you even look at it, where are you qualified to be with Xiaomo?" Lu Xingyan was a little exasperated, and then she said, "Do you know Xiaomo? Do you know why I'm sure you're getting married for fake? Because I know that Beimo originally had no intention of getting married, let alone to a woman like you, so you must be working together to deceive Grandma." Wenjiu's entire body tensed. Upon hearing Lu Xingyan's words, she suddenly realized that although she had moved into Beimo's home, she did not really know him well. She did not know about his past relationships, why he wanted to fake a marriage to deceive Grandma, and even if he had a girlfriend. She didn't even know if the woman in front of her had a deeper relationship with Beimo. In the past, when she was humiliated or questioned, she always didn't care. This was the first time, and a chill ran through her hands and feet. Since Miss Lu has such a good relationship with my Beimo, she can just ask him, there's no need to say this in front of me, Wenjiu said calmly on the surface of his face. Instead, she took her eyes off him and returned to the direction of the courtyard. However, she no longer had the heart to linger in the courtyard, and made up an excuse about not feeling well, saying that she wanted to go home. Naturally, Beimo followed her back. For some reason, she cared more about what Lu Xingyan had said and about her relationship with Beimo than about the fact that she hadn't seen Ling Shui next door. What was wrong with her? She wouldn't be having fantasies about Beimo, would she? Lu Xingyan was right. How could she, in her position, dare to have fantasies about Beimo? From the beginning, she had warned herself not to fall for the wrong person. She would never allow herself to think about it any further. It was at this moment that Beimo came to the bedside, touched her forehead, and asked, "Are you feeling unwell? Let me rub your forehead for you." Beimo lay down next to Wenjiu as he had the night before, and his warm fingers pressed just the right amount of pressure against her forehead. Wenjiu, however, turned her face away from him and avoided his palm. Instead, she said in an indifferent tone, "Mr. Hua, I said I would take care of my body and protect the baby. As for the discomfort in the early stages of pregnancy, I can overcome it on my own, so you don't have to do this." Beimo obviously sensed that Wenjiu was not very happy. He wondered if it was because Wenjiu seemed to have become strange after spending time alone with Lu Xingyan. Could it be because Lu Xingyan said she was poorly dressed? The next day was Friday, and on Friday night Wenjiu had to go to the studio to work. When she got up as usual, Beimo had already left the house. Wenjiu went to the closet to change. In the large closet, there were only a few of her clothes, crumpled like dried vegetables. Thinking of Lu Xingyan's overflowing closet, her clothes really looked like rags. It was at this time that Aunt Hao knocked on the door and entered. She gestured, and a few women in suits pushed in a rack of big-name women's clothing that were the latest new season styles. When Zhou was at a loss. Aunt Hao said with a smile, "Young mistress, this is the clothes and jewelry that young master ordered from the brand before he left this morning. He also told me to make sure you dress up nicely. Young master is usually very careless, but because of you, young mistress, he has become so attentive and caring." Facing the expensive clothes and jewelry in front of her, Wen Jiu was a little overwhelmed. It turned out that Hua Beima also remembered Lu Xing'an's implied criticism of her cheap clothes last night. Upon thinking about it, she realized that as Hua Beima's wife, if she dressed too shabbily, it would be embarrassing for him and would also invite the kind of questioning from people like Lu Xing'an that he had received yesterday. Therefore, even if she didn't want to wear it, she should still dress up for her role as Mrs. Hua. When Jiu picked a light green dress. The high-end cut flattered her figure, and she was still in the early stages of pregnancy, so she didn't look pregnant at all. She tied her hair up in a simple high ponytail as usual. She had naturally thick and long hair, and with her pale white skin and delicate facial features, she didn't need to wear makeup at all. After Aunt Hao helped her pick out a set of jewelry to wear, she looked completely like a noblewoman. Chapter 25. No matter how pretty your sister-in-law is, she is not for you to look at. No girl doesn't like to be beautiful, and Wen Jiu was no exception. Besides, she always had good taste in beauty, she just didn't have the means to dress up. Even she was satisfied with herself in the mirror at this moment. After dinner that day, she headed in the direction of the art studio. Unexpectedly, she ran into Hua Beima, who had just finished work and was heading home. Hua Beima froze in his steps, and when his gaze settled on Wen Jiu's face, a look of surprise flashed in the depths of his deep eyes. The two looked at each other, and Wen Jiu lowered her head first, because she had dressed up carefully, and in front of him, she was inexplicably embarrassed. Not far away, Lu Xing'an also saw the two of them. Today Wen Jiu's outfit had improved by more than a little, and Lu Xing'an quietly surveyed her outfit, not even missing the rubber band holding her hair back. "Xiao Mo." Lu Xing'an called out, taking large strides towards Hua Beima's direction. "Sister Xing'an, what's the matter?" Hua Beima then withdrew his gaze from Wen Jiu's face. "Shuai isn't answering his phone or opening the door. I'm worried something's happened to him. What do you think about going in together and taking a look?" Wen Jiu slowly walked towards the direction of the art studio, but she was very concerned about Ling Shuai's situation. Meanwhile, Hua Beima and Lu Xing'an were standing together, which made her feel inexplicably uncomfortable. But what right did she have to feel uncomfortable? Unexpectedly, instead of immediately responding to Lu Xing'an's words, Hua Beima looked back in the direction of Wen Jiu and said, "Jiu, where are you going?" "I'm going to work." Wen Jiu's tone was flat. Hua Beima's handsome face looked a little displeased. "The studio is just up ahead," Wen Jiu added, not wanting Hua Beima to think she was going to work part-time again. Lu Xing'an, who was standing nearby, asked with a smile, "Xiaomo, does your wife still need to work? From the sound of your tone, you don't even know where she works, do you?" "I know, I just forgot that she has a class tonight." "Painting is Xiaozhou's hobby," Hua Beima replied. Wen Jiu merely nodded in acknowledgement and quickly walked in the direction of the art studio. She didn't like seeing Hua Beima and Lu Xing'an getting too close. So, out of sight, out of mind. Hua Beima naturally sensed Wen Jiu's distance, and only returned to Lu Xing'an after following her with his eyes as she walked away. Wen Jiu didn't expect that as soon as she entered the studio, all her former colleagues and parents, including the children, looked over. The adults' eyes betrayed their surprise. Wen Jiu wondered, was she usually that sloppy? If she dressed a little better, would she see how shocked everyone would be? "Teacher Wen is so pretty today." A child smiled and praised her. Children are straightforward. When the other children heard the praise, they all started praising her too, so Wen Jiu could hear nothing but the sound of the children praising her. "Teacher Wen is so pretty, I like Teacher Wen. I hope my mother will become as pretty as Teacher Wen. I hope Teacher Wen will be my mother." The children were all trying to express their affection for Wen Jiu, and each one of them was more exaggerated than the last. Wen Jiu could only smile, stroke the child's head and silently think, children's words have no harm. This class is for the younger children, and Wen Jiu began to give a theory class. The little faces, still baby fat, were cute and adorable. Wen Jiu looked at these cute faces and thought about her unborn baby. For the first time in a long time, she looked forward to the baby's birth. She couldn't help but touch her stomach. She wondered what her and Hua Beima's baby would look like. Her father was tall and handsome, so the baby would be very good-looking, right? Wenjiu was taking a break in her office after a class when a colleague brought in an exquisite takeaway box. It was from the famous Zhuangji private kitchen in the capital, a restaurant not generally affordable to the average person. As the colleague placed the takeaway on Wenjiu's desk, he teased, "Wenjiu, you're suddenly dressed so well and ordering such an expensive takeaway, are you being kept?" As soon as he finished speaking, all 7 teachers in the office looked over with strange expressions. Wenjiu was extremely embarrassed. She wondered who had ordered the takeaway. She hadn't ordered it herself, so it couldn't have been Huabeima, could it? Although what her colleague had said was unpleasant, on second thought, her current relationship with Huabeima was hardly any more advanced than an escort relationship. In fact, what Lu Xingyan had said to humiliate her last night wasn't necessarily wrong. She was actually just paying Huabeima to have a child, and there was no deeper relationship. "Don't talk nonsense, I don't know who ordered it," Wenjiu answered unhappily. After thinking about it, Huabeima said that he had agreed not to interfere with the other person's life, so why did he send such an expensive takeaway to her office? Although one doesn't have to care too much about other people's stares when living, sometimes, even spittle can drown a person. She didn't eat it and continued to go to class. After class, Wenjiu returned with the takeaway. As she passed Villa 6, Lu Xingyu called out to her, "Sister-in-law, wow, you're really dressed up today, you're cheapening old Hua. By the way, everyone has been waiting for you for a long time. Come on, your husband is here too." Huabeima, who was originally talking, heard the sound and tilted his head in the direction of the door. Lu Xingyu's playboy complimented Wenjiu's good looks, which really made him unhappy. He originally thought that girls should dress up nicely, but now he suddenly didn't think so. He got up directly and walked to the door, punched Lu Xingyu, and scolded, "Sister-in-law, no matter how good-looking you are not for you to see." Wenjiu's face turned red. "Lao Hua, your possessiveness is a bit scary. I was just looking, I didn't do anything. What else do you want to do?" Huabeima's face fell. Seeing that Huabeima was really a bit unhappy, Lu Xingyu no longer dared to joke. At this time, Lu Xingyan also followed out. She saw the takeaway in Wenjiu's hand at a glance, so she asked, "Joe, why haven't you eaten the takeaway I just ordered for you? Not to your liking? You need to pay attention to your nutrition in the early stages of pregnancy. Did you order it?" Wenjiu was shocked. She felt that this was not like Huabeima's behavior. It turned out that Lu Xingyan had ordered it. Why did this woman seem to know all her past details? She deliberately ordered expensive takeaways for her, just to make her colleagues in the office gossip about her behind her back? To alienate her? If so, then this Lu Xingyan is really calculating. Or, she is just jealous of her relationship with Huabeimo. You're pregnant and you have to go to class for a long time. You must eat a lot during breaks. Lu Xingyan acts like a caring older sister in front of others. Only Wenjiu knows that she treats her differently behind her back. "Thank you, Bayamo hired a nanny for the family, and the food she cooks is already very nutritious. She will also cook a midnight snack for me at night. Sister N, you don't have to be so polite next time." Wenjiu's seemingly polite thanks. Lu Xingyan's heart tightened. She certainly understood Huabeimo. She had moved near his house about a year ago, and the number of times she had gone to his house was counted on one hand. If there was no need, he usually didn't let her in, and he didn't invite the live-in maid either. He had actually made an exception for Wenjiu. Chapter 26, Resolving Misunderstandings. "It's late, and my wife is tired, so let's go home and go to bed first," said Huabeima. "Gee, it's still early, and he's going home to hug his pretty sister-in-law to sleep." "I'm so jealous," teased Lu Xingyu. In the night, only Wenjiu noticed that Lu Xingyan's face was dark and gloomy. On the way home, Wenjiu kept his distance from Huabeima as much as possible. After entering the front door, Wenjiu handed the takeaway to Aunt Hao. "Young lady, Zhuang's private kitchen is not cheap. Did the young master order it for you? Why aren't you eating?" "I'm not in the mood." "Would you like it?" "But I just ate. I can't eat anything good." "Then you can dispose of it." Wenjiu is not a wasteful person, otherwise I'll just throw it away. Wenjiu didn't say anything and went straight upstairs. Since yesterday, Huabeima had clearly sensed that Wenjiu had been ignoring him and even deliberately distancing herself from him. Even though the two were not really husband and wife, this obvious avoidance still made him uncomfortable. Did he offend her in some way? As soon as he entered the room, Huabeima closed the door and grabbed Wenjiu's wrist. He pushed Wenjiu against the door and asked, "Did Sister N say something?" What? Wenjio's eyes flickered. Why, do you look like you don't want to talk to me? Huobeima's ears turned red. His breathing became heavier as he spoke. Wenjio finally looked up and met Huobeima's gaze. Mr. Hua, we are just in a cooperative relationship, and I shouldn't need to talk to you when no one else is around, should I? Wenjio said. Huobeima was speechless. After a while, he couldn't hold back anymore and said, I want to hear the truth. Mr. Hua and Miss Lu's relationship is probably not as simple as it seems, right? I don't want to be like a third party, standing between you. Wenjio finally told the truth. Huobeima's expression changed from anger to disbelief. What? Who told you that? He sounded like he'd heard the biggest joke ever. Does anyone need to say anything? Miss Lu's house has a lot of clothes and shoes that are the same style as yours, and there are a bunch of your photos on the wall in the bedroom. You must have been dating, right? Wenjio stared straight into Huobeima's eyes. But Huobeima had a face full of wanting to laugh. Me and Lu Xingyan? You're really something. Huobeima let Wenjio go. Isn't it? Then I'll tell you now, I have no relationship with Lu Xingyan, we're not dating now, and we've never been in the past. Huobeima explained very seriously. Wenjio was stunned. Unexpectedly, Huobeima would actually explain his personal relationships to her seriously. The annoyance that had started in her heart yesterday was like being dispersed, and it became clear in an instant. In the quiet bedroom, the atmosphere became a little unusual as they looked at each other. Although you haven't been dating, I feel that she should like you. Wenjio believed in her intuition. Sister N? Huobeima shook his head, as if he found it hard to accept. I don't like her anyway. This time, it was Wenjio's turn to be incredulous. She, a woman, felt that Lu Xingyan had femininity, but Huobeima didn't treat her like a woman. It was as if saying that he had a relationship with Lu Xingyan was a great insult to him. If it's because of Lu Xingyan, there's no need. If you don't like her, I won't go over there anymore. Huobeima turned around and went to the study, as if Lu Xingyan was completely irrelevant to his life. Wenjio was left in place, lost in thought. After returning from the Lu family last night, she could even imagine the tall Huobeima embracing the beautiful sister and kissing. Since when had she become so full of wild speculation? Late at night, after receiving a phone call, Huobeima got up suddenly and said, I'll be right there. Wenjui was also woken up. She turned on the desk lamp and asked, Mr. Hua, what's going on? Lao Ling ran out. He's been in a bad mood these past 2 days. I'll go look for him. Huobeima quickly changed his clothes. Wenjui lifted the quilt and said, I want to go too. Huobeima knew that Wenjui had always been very concerned about Ling Shuai's situation, hesitated for a moment, and nodded, then follow me. After the two of them left the villa together, they saw Lu Xingyan and his sister, as well as their friends, all outside. What are you still doing here? We need to split up and look for them, said Huobeima coldly. This is such a big place, where do we even start? Lu Xingyu was at a loss. You guys search the neighborhood, sweep all the high-rises and rooftops, and my wife and I will look outside, said Huobeima. I'll go with you guys, said Lu Xingyan, approaching. Huobeima coldly refused, no, my wife and I will be fine. Huobeima said, took Wenjio's wrist, and quickly returned to the garage. Wenjio was now truly convinced that Huobeima really didn't have the slightest interest in Lu Xingyan. He had said that he would not go to the Lu family next door in the future, and she had thought that he was just talking. Now, he was not even giving people face. Lu Xingyan was furious, but she had no reason to chase after him. According to Huobeima's understanding, the community is not far from the riverside, and Ling Shuai has gone to the riverside to daydream more than once late at night. If someone who is having trouble letting go goes to the riverside late at night, it is easy to imagine how dangerous it can be. After Huobeima drove to the riverside, he said to Wenjio, it's too dark outside, I'm going to go down and look for a while, you wait in the car and don't come out. Be careful then, Wenjio said with some worry. Huobeima looked back at Wenjio and nodded. In the blink of an eye, half an hour passed. Wenjio was a little panicked waiting in the car. She opened the car door and got out, walked to the square and looked down. With the help of the lights from the greenbelt, she saw a shaky person standing on the edge of the cliff not far away. Wenjio's heart tightened with fear. She was sure that person was Ling Shuai, who everyone was looking for. Looking around, she didn't see Huobei, so she guessed that he had run off in the direction of the beach to look for someone. Watching the way the man swayed in the wind, Wenjiao couldn't wait any longer. If something happened to Ling Shuai, her brother's hope of waking up in this life would be even slimmer. Thinking about this, she quickly walked towards the cliff. When she was about to approach the man, she saw that the man's foot took another step forward. He stepped on a stone, causing gravel to fall off the soil and into the river. In the middle of the night, the stone was silently swallowed by the river, which was extremely frustrating. Mr. Ling Shuai. I'm Huobeima's wife, the one who delivered the cake to you the other day. Wenjiao gathered her courage and introduced herself. She had heard them say that their friendship was truly strong, otherwise, they would not have moved in next to Ling Shuai to take care of him because he was sick. She thought that Ling Shuai must not have heard about Huobeima's marriage yet, and if she introduced herself like this, would it attract his attention a little? Sure enough, Ling Shuai's body stiffened, and the gravel under his feet fell into the river one after the other. Chapter 27. For the first time, she felt someone was worried about her. Wenjiao's heart skipped a beat. The man, who had been about to step into the river, drew back his foot and slowly turned around. In the moonlight, Wenjiao was wearing a loose-fitting silk dress. The river breeze messed up her long hair, and her pretty face looked like it had a hazy filter over it, as if she had seen it somewhere before. I'm really being presumptuous, but can you come over here for a second? I want to say a few words. Wenjiao was anxious, fearing that Ling Shuai would throw himself into the river late at night. She was relieved when Ling Shuai turned and walked over. When he got closer, he saw Wenjiao's face, and a shallow light ignited in the hollow of her eyes. Lao Hua got married? Ling Shuai asked in disbelief. Wenjiao pondered why everyone looked incredulous when they heard that Huobeima had gotten married. He was 29 years old, was it abnormal for him to get married? However, she was really surprised. Ling Shuai's depression had reached the point where he avoided socializing, distanced himself from friends and family, and became pessimistic about life. He never expected that he would actually be willing to talk to her and care about her marriage to Huobeima. Yes, we just got married. Originally, Beima was going to introduce me to you on your birthday. Wenjiao replied. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit you with the cake that day. The singing in the courtyard at the time made me feel very annoyed. Ling Shuai's voice was very gentle. He was about 1.8 meters tall and had a thin figure, probably due to malnutrition caused by not eating properly. Fortunately, his facial features, which were as soft and beautiful as Rowenyu's, were still good-looking and made people feel pity for him. Even though he was sick, he was still afraid of causing trouble and harm to others. Mr. Ling, would you come over here first? Wenjiao tried to get him to come back a little more, and only by staying away from the river could he escape danger. However, I want to feel the wind right now, I don't want to go back. Ling Shuai paused for a moment and gave a bitter smile. I guess they're looking for me again. Go back and tell them that I'm not suicidal, I just want to be alone for a while. From his tone, Huobeima and the others had come out looking for him late at night more than once. Wenjiao had finally found a chance to get close to Ling Shuai, and it was too dangerous for a depressed person who was desperate about life to be alone by the river late at night. She couldn't possibly let him go back at this time. Then I'll keep you company in the wind. Wen said, and simply sat down on a sturdy boulder by the river. Ling Shuai sat down next to her. The evening breeze blew, the bright river view across the river was picturesque, and the insects hidden in the grass around them were humming incessantly. Mr. Ling, actually, I've heard everything about you from Beima. I wonder if you're interested in hearing about me. Wen said on her own initiative. Well, go ahead. Wenjiao knew that someone in Ling Shuai's situation would not be interested in other people's affairs, but he was very polite and did not refuse to hear her story. Can you imagine your biological parents only caring about money and not loving you? My parents did. The year I was born, my father went bankrupt and racked up a lot of debt. My parents decided that I was the cause of their misfortune. My mother in particular believed that I was the reason for all the problems in her life. From a young age, I was like a foundling, ignored by my family. Later, I was not allowed to take the college entrance exam, and in order to get a high bride price, I was forced to marry an old man in his 50s. Fortunately, I met Beimo. Wenjiao finished with tears in his eyes. Ling Shuai's gaze wavered slightly, and he wanted to comfort Wenjiao, but he felt even more miserable, as if he was not qualified to comfort others. In fact, I looked up the news about the car accident when you were a child. Your father left because he was protecting you, didn't he? Wenjiao looked at Ling Shuai. Ling Shuai's lips were pursed tightly, and his hands were clenched into fists, as if he didn't want to talk about it. Your mother did the same thing. As soon as the car accident happened, she hugged you tightly. That's why you survived the tragic car accident unscathed. They really loved you and protected you with their lives. Stop it. Ling Shuai covered his head, which was throbbing in pain. His handsome face was completely wrinkled, almost distorted. This was a knot in his heart that he could never get out of in his lifetime. Originally, his mother, who had become a vegetable, was his only hope for survival. He studied medicine so hard, and finally managed to wake her up, but she still left. Both parents died because of me. I am the real disaster. Ling Shuai wept bitterly. No, you are very lucky. You have a pair of parents who love you with their lives, and you have not let them down. You have studied medicine so hard over the years and become an expert in resuscitating people in a vegetative state. They must be so proud of you in heaven. They saved your life at the risk of their own, hoping that you could continue their lives and live well. Do you understand? Wen Jiao said with emotion. Ling Shuai was shocked. It seemed that if he thought about it from a different perspective, he was luckier than Wen Jiao, even though he was more unfortunate than Wen Jiao. Wen Jiao's parents were alive, but they were like dead, while his parents were gone, but they would always live in his heart. His sudden anger subsided, his distorted features gradually returned to normal, and his hand covering his head was lowered. He looked back at Wen Jiao again, his vacant gaze seemed to have a little more spirit. Yes, they really love me with their lives. If I think about it like that, I really am lucky. As Ling Shuai's voice fell, he slowly looked up and gazed at the starry night sky. Wen Jiao followed his gaze and raised her head. She had been so busy with the trivialities of life that she had forgotten to look up. She had forgotten how beautiful the night sky was and how comfortable the river breeze felt. At that moment, Hua Beima's voice came over. Ling Shuai. Ling Shuai. Wen Jiao and Ling Shuai looked in the direction of the voice and heard Hua Beima shouting along the beach. Judging by the sound, he seemed to be in a hurry. Beima, we're over here. Wen Jiao waved at him. Hua Beima's breathing caught when he heard the sound and saw a man and a woman sitting on the edge of the cliff. He quickly ran towards the cliff. When he finally approached Ling Shuai and Wen Jiao slowly got up, and Ling Shuai hurriedly followed suit, planning to reach out to help Wen Jiao. Hua Beima had already grabbed Wen Jiao's arm first, and after helping her up, he held her tightly in his arms, as if he was afraid she would fall into the river. Wen Jiao looked down at him as he held her arm tightly. Visibly, his arm was even shaking. She was slightly startled. Growing up, no one had ever worried about her safety. This was the first time she felt someone worrying about her. Although Hua Beima was very angry at this moment, he was afraid of provoking Ling Shuai, so he could only suppress his anger. Go home. Hua Beima gestured for Ling Shuai to go first. He originally thought that Ling Shuai might stubbornly refuse to go home, but unexpectedly, he obediently walked in front, occasionally looking back, as if he was worried that they would both fall into the river. Hua Beima secretly wondered what Wen Jiao had just said to Ling Shuai. Why did he feel like he had changed? Chapter 28, My Wife, I Can Take Care of Myself. The next night, Wen Jiao heard Hua Beima's phone beeping with text messages every now and then when he returned from work at the art studio. However, he didn't even lift an eyelid, focusing intently on the computer. Wen Jiao couldn't help but remind him, Mr. Hua, it seems someone is looking for you. Hua Beima ignored him. Wen Jiao was puzzled when the phone on his desk rang. Hua Beima then picked up the phone impatiently. What is it? La Hua, my sister said that you wouldn't come over today even when she asked you to, and you didn't reply to her text messages. You've got a wife now, so you don't need friends, right? Lu Xingyu said in a grumpy tone. Your sister is not my friend, so tell her not to keep asking me to come to your house in the future, so as to avoid misunderstandings. Hua Beima answered coldly. Are you crazy? My sister doesn't have any feelings for you? Is your wife being jealous? It's not my wife who's jealous, it's me who doesn't give her any reason to be. As Hua Beima spoke, he lifted his eyelid and glanced in the direction of Wen Jiao. Wen Jiao blushed. She really wanted to say that last night she wasn't jealous at all, but she had been very unhappy those 2 days, and she didn't know how to explain it, so she simply decided not to mention it. Hua Beima then hung up the phone. So, was this guy really not just saying that he wouldn't go to Lu Xingyan's house anymore? For a week, Lu Xingyan had repeatedly reached out to Hua Beima, but he had ignored her. Perhaps the more Hua Beima ignored her, the more anxious she became, so she reached out to him even more actively, or asked Lu Xingyu to help arrange a meeting with him. This day, she even came directly to the house and knocked on the door. After learning of this, Huobei instructed Anne how to go out and deal with it. Miss Lu, I'm really sorry, but the young master said that it is not convenient for outsiders to come into the house. Aunt Hao looked apologetic. Lu Xingyan's face instantly paled. Wenjiu must have said something, and that's why Huobei suddenly avoided her. But if it was something unimportant, why would he care? Originally, she was very sure that Huobei and Wenjiu were in a contractual relationship, but now it seems that Wenjiu's place in Huobei's heart is much more important than she had imagined. Instead, after all these years, did Huobei really not see her as a person of the opposite sex that he could associate with? How insignificant she must be in his heart for him to ignore her because of another woman. That night, Lu Xingyan asked Lu Xingyu to call again. Lao, it's not my sister and I who are looking for you tonight, it's Lao Ling. He's out, and he wants you to bring your wife to our house for a get-together. Huobei's deep gaze focused, and a hint of light joy appeared in his eyes. If it's Lao Ling who wants to see us, we'll go directly to his house when he gets home. Huobei said. When Jiobang waved his hand at him, indicating that he should not refuse. A week ago, she also took a desperate risk and said those words to Ling Shuai with a try-it-out attitude. These days, she has been anxiously hoping that Ling Shuai can change, and it was only today that she finally got news from him. She also wondered if he had improved. Or, was his improvement related to what she said that night? I'm going. When Jiu whispered, gesturing with her hand in the air. Huobei glanced at her before changing his mind. Okay, my wife and I will be there in a bit. After hanging up the phone, the two of them went next door together. Sure enough, Lu Xingyu hadn't lied, Ling Shuai really had come out. After a week apart, although he was still as thin as ever, his complexion was much better. You should take your medicine. You have to be proactive when you're sick, Lu Xingyan said to Ling Shuai. Wen Jiu then realized that after that day, Ling Shuai had finally started cooperating with his treatment. He had been eating and taking his medicine seriously every day, so it was no wonder that his spirits had improved so much in just a week. Oh, the was have finally shown up, Yin Shaokang exclaimed. Everyone's attention fell on the two of them at the same time. When Ling Shuai looked at Wen Jiu, he gave her a slight smile, as if to thank her. That night, she had effectively opened up her wounds to comfort him. When the two walked over to the stone table, they sat down opposite each other. Lu Xingyan, who had been standing, walked directly to the empty seat next to Huobei and sat down naturally. Unexpectedly, as soon as Lu Xingyan sat down, Huobei stood up directly and walked around to the other side of Wen Jiu and took his seat. Lu Xingyan's heart felt like it had been stabbed by a sharp thorn, so painful that she could not breathe. Did Huobei really love this woman? He even avoided sitting next to her to avoid suspicion? Wen Jiu also didn't expect Huobei's reaction to be so big. But when she saw Huobei avoid Lu Xingyan, her mood was like drinking the spring water in the mountains, sweet and nourishing, and the smile on the corner of her mouth lingered for a long time. At this time, Ling Shuai handed the grilled skewers in his hands to Wen Jiu and said gently to her, "Try this." Everyone looked at Ling Shuai in shock. No one expected that Ling Shuai, who had ignored everyone for nearly a year, would take such good care of Wen Jiu. Perceiving the strange looks from everyone, Ling Shuai's ears turned red. He hurriedly explained, Lao's wife doesn't know everyone, so she should take care of them a bit more. Everyone was of course very happy that Ling Shuai would take care of people. However, Huobei knew very well that it must have been something Wen Jiu said to Ling Shuai that night that caused such a big change in him. In any case, he really admired her. They, a group of friends and doctors, could not persuade Ling Shuai, but she had managed to do so in a short period of time. Cough cough. Huobei coughed twice to fake it, and reminded unhappily, Lao Ling, you just take care of yourself, as for my wife, I will take care of her myself. Huobei had meant these words to be serious, but in the end everyone burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. Xingyu has been calling a lot these 2 days, accusing Lao Hui of forgetting his friends for the sake of women. I thought he was just talking nonsense, but I never expected that Lao Hua, who used to be a womanizer, has actually changed a lot after getting married. His eyes are on his wife, and his heart only has his wife. I heard that you even avoided Injia because of your sister-in-law. Are you trying to make me laugh to death? Yin Shaokang is going to laugh himself rich. Isn't that right? It's like my sister has a thing for him. I'm speechless. If Ling hadn't come out today, he wouldn't have bothered to come to our house. Lu Xingyu lit a cigarette. Huobei immediately snuffed it out, saying sternly, don't smoke in front of a pregnant woman. Look at that, TSK, TSK. He's always protecting his sister-in-law. Lu Xingyu helplessly extinguished the cigarette butt. Wen Jiao felt her face burn a little. On second thought, Hua Beima does take good care of her. But the reason he protects her must be because of the baby, right? Ling Shui glanced at Wen Jiao's flat stomach and asked, "Is Mrs. Hua pregnant?" "Yes," Hua Beima answered. Ling Shui then realized how dangerous it was for Wen Jiao to accompany him and chat by the cliff that night. Among the group, only Lu Xingyan, who was usually a chatterbox, kept drinking in silence. Chapter 29. I like Xiao Mo, I like Hua Beima. Everyone was so happy because Ling Shui had come out to the party that they didn't remember how long it had been since he had last gathered with everyone. They all gathered around Ling Shui and chatted. Naturally, no one paid any attention to Lu Xingyan. "Old Ling, you're right to think this way. You studied medicine for half your life and became an expert in resuscitating comatose patients in the medical field. Do you know how many patients and families are waiting for you to save?" Yin Shaokong picked up his wine glass and clinked it against Ling Shui's. Ling Shui was drinking a beverage, but he still picked up the glass and toasted Yin Shaokong. Wen Jian's eyes lit up when they got to this point. She still didn't dare to ask Ling Shui for her request. Ling Shui was a depressive himself, and she couldn't ask him to heal her brother until he got better. If you want a family, you should do what Lao Hua did and find a girl you like and have 2 kids. Look at Lao Hua now. Compared to before, doesn't he seem like a different person? Before, his face was always dark and gloomy, and every time I saw him, I felt like I owed him money. Xia Ziyu complained. Hua Beimo gave him a cold stare, and he quickly pursed his lips and raised his hands in surrender. Wen Jiao couldn't help but wonder, with Hua Beimo's qualifications, didn't he have a woman before? It's impossible, right? Or maybe there were too many women and he didn't want to give anyone a title? So, none of these friends have seen his woman? Judging from his performance that night, he has a lot of needs in that area. How could a man as handsome and hugely wealthy as him not have a woman? Only Lu Xingyan kept drinking glass after glass of wine alone, until everyone noticed her and she was so drunk that her face was buried in the table. But she was still trying to reach out for the glass. Sis, why are you drinking so much?" Lu Xingyu hurriedly stepped forward and snatched the glass from Lu Xingyan's hands. Lu Xingyan's vision was blurry, and her mind was full of obsessions. "Brothers, doesn't my sister look good? Why doesn't the man I like me?" Lu Xingyan suddenly looked up at everyone. Her head was about to explode with heat, and the words she had hidden in her heart could no longer be contained. Everyone present was dumbfounded. All along, everyone had thought that Lu Xingyan was just being picky, and that was why there were no men around her that she liked. They never imagined that this normally incredibly proud woman would also have such moments of low self-confidence. She even said that she had a man she liked? "Sis, who do you like? Whoever it is, you just say it, and no matter who it is, we'll tie him up at home and force him to marry you." Lu Xingyu, like their parents, was looking forward to their sister getting married. "Yes, and we younger brothers will help tie the knot." Yin Shaokong patted his chest. "I like." Lu Xingyan's distracted gaze searched the scene. Wen Jiao glanced secretly at Hua Beima next to him. But he was sitting upright, as if it had nothing to do with him. At first, Wen Jiao suspected that Lu Xingyan liked him, but he thought that women liked to guess. It wasn't until these past few days that he started to deliberately avoid her, and Lu Xingyan obviously panicked, and he felt something was wrong. At this moment, when he heard that Lu Xingyan had a crush on someone, he vaguely guessed something. Looking back over the years, Lu Xingyan seemed to be really different towards him and the other younger brothers. However, he had never thought of her in that way, so naturally he had not noticed at all. Even though he had already guessed the answer, he still did not expect Lu Xingyan to point at him with a shaky finger. Even her fingertips were trembling. "I like Xiao Mo, I like Hua Beimo." There was complete silence in the room. "Can't you all see? Just because I'm 5 years older than you, and you all treat me like an older sister, no one has noticed that I'm actually a woman in full bloom? The year I graduated from university, I fell in love with Beimo, but I knew about his past, and I knew that he would never find a woman in his life. I was worried that if I told him how I felt, we wouldn't even be able to remain friends. I never imagined that one day, he would find a woman before me, and even get her pregnant. Suddenly, I felt like my years of restraint had been a joke." Lu Xingyan burst into tears as she spoke. For 11 years, she had secretly loved him for 11 whole years. Because of the age gap of 5 years and his aloof aura, she never had the courage to confess her love. Late at night, she wrote him love letters, one after the other, imagining that he liked her as much as she liked him. She fantasized about the day he would suddenly tell her that he had liked her for many years. But now, all her fantasies had been shattered. If he hadn't been avoiding her these days, she would have been prepared to spend the rest of her life with him. The scene was like a spell had been cast, everyone was frozen in place, no one dared to move. Yin Xiaokong and Xia Jiyu first looked at Wen Jiao, secretly wanting to know his reaction, and then their gaze fell together on Huobeimo's face. Huobeimo didn't show any emotion throughout the whole process, and after a long while, he said flatly, "Sister Ren has drunk too much, you help her go inside and rest." Lu Xingyu never would have guessed that his sister would like his friend. She really hid it very well, and he didn't notice at all. It was also possible that they didn't consider Lu Xingyan their peer at all, and never thought about it. Thinking back, Lu Xingyan often asked him about Huobeimo's emotional state, for example, whether any girls at school were chasing after him. He thought that Lu Xingyan liked to gossip and never took it seriously. At this moment, after Huobeimo reminded him, he realized that he really should help Lu Xingyan back home, otherwise if they continued talking, she would be too embarrassed to face people for the rest of her life when she woke up tomorrow. "Sister, don't be a disgrace, was wife is pregnant, aren't you embarrassing everyone by saying that?" Lu Xingyu whispered, took Lu Xingyan's arm, then crouched down, placed her hands on her neck, gritted her teeth and picked her up. "Sister-in-law, I'm sorry, my sister is drunk, so don't take her words seriously." Lu Xingyu did not forget to reassure Wen Jiao. Then, he left carrying Lu Xingyan on his back. As soon as they left, Yin Xiaokong and Xia Ziyu really couldn't hold back anymore. "My goodness, Sister Ren has always played with us, but it turns out that she likes Lao Hua? I really didn't see it." Yin Xiaokong was shocked. No wonder she bought a house next to Lao Hua's, saying that it was for the convenience of taking care of Lao Ling. Xia Ziyu agreed. The two of them spoke at the same time, not paying any attention to the other two protagonists who were still present. Cough. Huobeimo coughed twice. The two people who were having a heated discussion hurriedly shut up. At this time, a scream came from the direction of the garden, and then Huobeimo's phone rang. It was Lu Xingyu, who had just carried his sister back to her room to rest, calling. "Huobeimo, you come in and help me. My sister fell into the pond and insists that you pull her out. I really can't hold on any longer. Hurry, if you don't come soon, I'm going to die." After hanging up the phone, Huobeimo looked at Wen Jiao, who was standing next to him. "Are you coming?" he asked. Chapter 30, I want to be your woman. "You go and take a look yourself." "It's fine," Wen Jiao said, declining. Huobeimo got up and took her hand directly. Together. Wen Jiao stared at his large hand pulling her wrist in disbelief. Unexpectedly, he was so considerate as to take such good care of her feelings, and indeed did not give her a chance to be jealous. She knew it was thanks to the baby again. After all, if a pregnant woman is unhappy, it will affect the health of the baby. By the pond in front of the garden, Lu Xingyu was holding onto the fragile wild grass with one hand, while with the other he was holding Lu Xingyan, who was half submerged in the pond. "Sister, are you crazy? Come up here quickly. Are you even willing to risk your life for a man? Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to someone better. Is there really a man more dazzling than him?" Lu Xingyan muttered. When you're young, you really shouldn't meet someone too amazing. Just because she attended his 18th birthday banquet that year, she was delayed for the rest of her life by that fleeting glance. 11 years, a whole 11 years, do you know that he has been in my dreams my entire youth? The weeds Lu Xingyu was holding onto were loosened, and his body tilted towards the pond. He instinctively let out a cry for help. Huobeimo and Wen Jiao paused. Wen Jiao hurriedly said, "Mr. Hua, you go help, that pond doesn't look very shallow. You wait here for me." Huobeimo gave instructions and then quickly walked forward. After all, human life is at stake. In the darkness, Wen Jiao watched Huobeimo approach the direction of the two siblings, with mixed emotions. After all, they had been good friends for so many years, and it was only because of her that the situation had become so chaotic. And she, who was not even Huobeimo's wife, suddenly realized that if Lu Xingyan confessed, Huobeimo wanted to develop a relationship with her, she would not even have the right to be upset. Because they had made a deal that they would not interfere with each other's private lives. When Jian felt a sense of suffocation in his heart as he watched Huobeimo walk to the edge of the pond and extend a helping hand to Lu Xingyan. A smile finally appeared on Lu Xingyan's tear-stained face. She cooperatively raised her hand, intending to hold Huobeimo's hand with the momentum. Unexpectedly, Huobeimo raised his wrist and grabbed Lu Xingyan's hair. As he tugged, Lu Xingyan was in pain and embarrassed, and could only go back to the shore with the force in the direction of Lu Xingyan. When Judu was stunned. This works? After pulling the person back from the pond, Huobeima flicked his palm, as if it was dirty, and then said sternly, Lu Xingyan, have you caused enough trouble? I just like you, what have I done wrong? What have I caused trouble with? Lu Xingyan simply took advantage of the alcohol and grabbed his arm, getting mud on his shirt. She fixed her longing gaze on his eyes and said, come with me, I have something to say to you. If after I've said these words, you still insist that you don't have any interest in me, then I'll accept it. I'm married, and I have nothing to say to you. Don't dare come with me? If you don't dare come, it proves that you have something on your conscience. Lu Xingyan used provocation. Huobeima subconsciously looked over at Wenjiu, who was standing in the darkness not far away. Old Hua, look at how drunk my sister is. Why don't you take her upstairs? If there's anything to be said, you're a big man, if you don't have any thoughts, are you afraid she'll eat you? Lu Xingyu said, covered in mud and looking very disheveled. Huobeima, however, waved in the direction of Wenjiu. Wife, come here for a moment. Wenjiu had just been hiding in the corner watching the show. When she was called by name, she could only grit her teeth and quietly poke her head out. She walked over. Lu Xingyan's hostility towards her was undisguised, and her gaze at her was as sharp as a hidden knife. I would like to ask Beima to walk me upstairs. I have something I want to say to him alone. You should have confidence in your husband, shouldn't you? Lu Xingyan smiled flirtatiously. She usually liked to wear bright colors, and with this smile, she looked like an open and gorgeous red rose. The charm of a mature woman is truly irresistible. To be honest, if such a woman gave a wink, I'm afraid no man could resist. When Jiu worried that if Huobeima went upstairs with her alone, even he would be unable to resist. After all, in his memory of that night, she had easily seduced him. Later, he was almost frantic with possessiveness. A man's instinctive desire for a woman was more urgent than anyone else's. Could he really withstand the flirtatious Lu Xingyan? But whether he can resist or not has nothing to do with her as a contracted wife. Of course it does. Wen Jiu gave a faint smile and pretended to be generous. She had always known that many things were beyond her control, even if she was willing. She knew exactly what Lu Xingyan wanted when she asked Huobeimo to come upstairs. With Wen Jiu's consent, Huobeimo agreed to escort Lu Xingyan upstairs alone. The main reason was that they had known each other since childhood and should give each other an explanation before saying goodbye. As soon as the two of them had left, Lu Xingyu hurriedly said to Wen Jiu, sister-in-law, my sister is not a bad person, she won't do anything to old Hua, don't worry. What Wen Jiu was thinking was, in the face of emotions, what is there to distinguish between good and bad people? Isn't the game between men and women just a matter of a thought, a matter of seconds at the most? After Lu Xingyu had finished speaking, she looked down at the mud all over her body and apologetically said, I'll go in and wash up first. Okay. Wen Jiu seemed to understand and replied. Once Lu Xingyu left, she was left alone in front of the door. Watching Huobeima and Lu Xingyan go upstairs, her heart felt as cold as ice, and even her fingertips went numb. The summer night breeze was obviously very comfortable, but why did it feel so cold today when it blew? It was at this time that Wen Jiu's phone suddenly rang, pulling her thoughts back to reality. She wondered who would be calling her at this late hour. Wen Jiu took out her phone and was shocked to find the words Dad flashing on the screen. This was the nickname she had previously changed for Huobeima. When she saw that he was calling her with a video call, Wen Jiu felt much better, as if a breeze had blown through her heart, and her mouth unconsciously curled up. Looking up, she saw Huobeima standing in the hallway with his hands behind his back, clutching his phone. He gave a thumbs up with his other hand, as if to reassure her, but also to urge her to accept the video call. Wen Jiu gave a small smile and accepted the call. She knew that Huobeima was trying to reassure her. Whether it was because he wanted her to feel at ease while carrying the baby, or for some other reason, she really felt reassured and comfortable by his actions. On the video call, Huobeima followed Lu Xingyan into her bedroom. As soon as the two of them entered the bedroom, Lu Xingyan locked the door behind them. Looking around the bedroom, Huobeima immediately noticed the photo wall and saw that many of the items in the room were the same as his. Wen Jiuning could only see the same items, but they were not as many as those that Huobeima could see for himself. He was really surprised that Lu Xingyan had such a deep obsession with him. Naturally, entering Lu Xingyan's bedroom, one could know her deep feelings without saying a word. Without saying a word, Lu Xingyan began to unbutton the V-neck in front of her. With tears in her eyes, she said, Bema, I don't want to be your sister. I want to be your woman, even just once.